I'd like to call to order the August 21st, 2018 meeting of the Board of Supervisors in Sacramento. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Good morning. Supervisors Cerna.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
Natoli. Peters.
Here.
And you have a quorum. This meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T UVerse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and is webcast at sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated Friday, August 24th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. A DVD copy is available for checkout from any local library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may fill out a speaker slip and hand it to staff. When the chair calls your name, please come to the podium. Also, please silence your electronic devices at this time.
Okay. Would everyone rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, for your consent matters, items 1 through 40, you do have an addendum item, resolution honoring Mona Pasquale for the outstanding service to the state of California and the Asian Pacific Islander community. And that is all that I have.
Yes.
I just want to
Mr. Kennedy.
thank the chair for allowing me to throw that in the last minute.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Any comments on any items? Mr. Cerna?
Item 12, please.
Item 12, Sacramento International Airport Runway Pavement Rehabilitation Project, bids to be received on October 18, 2018.
I just wanted to take the opportunity, noting this is on our consent calendar this morning, and I'm looking at our Director of Municipal Services, Mr. Leonard. I want to make sure that my constituents in the North Natomas community have notice of when the pavement rehabilitation project will actually begin to affect traffic movements from SMF, because we all know that we'll be forced to live with one runway for a while. That'll be the easterly runway, which means that altitudes and traffic patterns will be temporarily affected, and I want to make sure that that community understands well in advance when that's going to affect their lives out there.
Certainly. We will make sure that occurs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Natoli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, if I could just, on item 28, very quickly.
Item 28 is the asphalt concrete overlay project, federal to 2018.
And my comment here is that there's, on the section of Florin Road from South Watt to Bradshaw, there is a good deal of construction in that area with new home construction, and there's some frontage improvements, some streets that are connecting to Florin Road from development that's occurring between there and Gerber. I trust we'll coordinate that, but just so, it's been a long time coming to get the project in place, and if there's anything we can do with the development and some of the requirements that they have to make sure that gets done so that we don't lay some new asphalt down, and then guess what, gets cut into because, you know, there's an encroachment that's permitted, obviously, to occur there. So, Mike, I think coordination, and I know DOT is very good about that, but I would ask that, again, it's been a long time coming, probably won't see it for another few years at least before we get another overlay, so I'd like to make sure that when we get that new pavement service down, that any cuts for water lines or sewer lines, that we anticipate or contemplate that so we can, you know, make sure that surface stays as nice as it can be for a while to come. So, okay, good. That's all I have. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to note for the record that I'm recusing myself on items 3 and 23 due to potential conflict of interest. Okay.
Are you guys ready to vote?
I think that's everything.
Yes, that concludes my notes. I don't have any further notes.
Move consent calendar.
Please vote.
Unanimous vote, and let the records reflect that Supervisor Peters recused from items 3 and 23 due to a potential conflict of interest.
Madam Chair, before we get into the hearing items, I'd would like to introduce our new Health Services Director.
Sure.
Dr.
Mr. Bielenson,
Yep.
would you come up front, please? This is part of the hazing of starting work at the county.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for confirming me a few weeks ago.
First comment, you have to raise the podium so we can hear you. Maybe Flo could
Flo, can you
show
Have
where
a
the
magic
button is.
podium.
Oh. Like the standing desk.
Yes.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for confirming me a few weeks ago. I've met with Supervisor Frost and Natoli and Cerna, and I'm meeting with you and Hedger Kennedy tomorrow. I come from Sacramento, actually. I'm returning to my home city. I grew up here when I was 6 to 17, then moved back east and worked as the Baltimore City Health Commissioner, the Howard County Health Officer, and the head of a nonprofit health insurance cooperative called Evergreen. I'm very pleased to be working for Nav and Bruce and Nancy, and for all of you and the citizens of Sacramento County, and look forward to working with you over the next several years.
Great. Well, welcome and wishes for much success.
Thank you very much.
One other new thing I wanted to note was the new format on the staff reports, which I think are a wonderful change, and they're much easier to read, not only in the font, but they're not as repetitious as they were before. So thanks to the county executive and staff for putting that together.
You're welcome.
Okay, call your first
Okay,
item.
for your presentation matters, we are going to read item 41 and 42 together. This is the presentation of resolution honoring agricultural pest detection canine Caro on the occasion of his retirement, and also on the occasion of the canine Dozer on the occasion of his retirement.
Julie Jensen and her fan club would come forward. These resolutions aren't too big for their doghouse. Well, so maybe around front you can meet Cairo and Dozer, and everyone can see them. First, Dozer, who is our black lab, oh, no, it's our brown lab here. He's had a long, distinguished career in the California Agricultural Detector Dog Program. He's maintained the highest statistics in California and found the most pests in the history of the program, starting his career with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and in the Nutria program, and then worked within the Smuggling Interdiction and Trade Compliance program before serving with distinction for Sacramento County Department of Agriculture. He's anxious to get moving. So Dozer has detected countless unmarked packages containing plant material destined for Sacramento area, in which many of those packages contain serious agricultural pests that could have led to costly infestations, devastating economic loss to the agricultural industry, and damage to the environment. The Dozer and his handler, Jennifer Berger, worked long hours, day and night, throughout the Sacramento Valley region, from San Joaquin County to the south and Shasta County in the north, inspecting packages at FedEx, UPS, and the U.S. Postal Service facilities. Dozer promoted the Canine Detector Dog Program and its importance at numerous events every year, like the farm days for children and ag days in nearby county, meeting legislators at the Capitol and demonstrating his supreme skills by finding hidden packages of fruits and vegetables in the offices. So the Board of Supervisors would like to recognize Dozer for his exemplary detection abilities, devotion to duty, focus and unmatched drive, professionalism, and his unwavering loyalty and companionship to honor Dozer, Canine Detector Dog, on the occasion of his retirement. And we have a resolution for Dozer.
Do we have a milk bone for him? Do we have a milk bone for him?
I think that's what they meant here. And then we have another retirement today of another distinguished Labrador Retriever. He had a distinguished career in the Detector Dog Program, starting again with the USDA Smuggling Interdiction. And Cairo and his handler, Mariah, worked long hours and nights inspecting packages throughout the Sacramento region,
at FedEx, UPS, and U.S. Postal Service facilities. He's been an ambassador for Sacramento County, and it's important, noting the importance of the dog program every year up and down the valley. And he has been recognized for having the largest number of pest fines for a dog team in California in 2017. So Cairo has demonstrated unwavering dedication to work, extreme accuracy in locating targets, his sociability in public interactions, and he has an exceptional work ethic. But despite his keen nose, he's reached the mandatory retirement age of 9. And so he is going to be retiring soon. And again, we'd like to recognize him for his exemplary detection abilities, devotion to duty, focus, and unmatched drive, professionalism, and unwavering loyalty, and hope that Cairo has a very long and healthy retirement. So,
Madam Chair, I just would say, I'm sure you recall, a few years ago, we actually had a demonstration in the chambers. So, a few years ago,
yes.
we had a demonstration because I remember there was some budget deliberations about county contribution and how important it was. I know this board chose to make sure that we maintained our commitment on behalf of the county, certainly for pest detection, but we actually had them come in the chamber. I don't know whether it was Cairo or not that came in here, but they put the packages in the
Dozer.
It was Dozer.
Yeah.
It came in and I think showed their skill set right here in the chambers. But the importance of the program, as you stressed, is critical, and certainly with the agricultural industry in this county. And I just know that we've maintained that commitment, even though it was kind of touch and go there for a while. And certainly, I think
during the tough times. Yeah. Well, now they'll be detecting treats.
They're pretty good at that. I can see that.
Yeah. So, Julie, did you want to have something to say?
I just wanted to say a couple of words. I wanted to thank both Cairo and Dozer for their service, but even more so, I really wanted to recognize the dedication of Jennifer and Mariah. The dedication and the time that they give to these dogs and to the program is really unmatched. They're working at all hours of the night in the post office in the early morning before they're even have started their sort. So we know people are working in the main post office all night, and the dogs are there too. So I just want to recognize that. Also, I want to thank, we have a couple of people here from other counties, Solano County and Yolo County have come, because these dogs don't work just for Sacramento County, they work for all of Northern California, and they work throughout Northern California. And so I just want to thank them for coming and recognizing what a service these dogs have provided. So
Thank you all. Thanks for bringing them in.
All right, good picture. He detected where the biscuits are at.
Just want to know how they fill out their Form 700s without any hands.
So are the handlers retiring?
Oh, no, blind.
Are you guys getting new dogs?
We already did, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, very
We'll
good.
be doing the next demonstration in the chamber.
Okay. Come on.
Okay. Well, yes, well, thank you all. Thank you
Thanks, yeah.
for bringing them in.
Item 43 is the presentation proclaiming September 2018 as Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month in Sacramento County.
If Lori Miller would come to the podium. We are proclaiming September 2018 as Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month in Sacramento, and Lori and friends are here today to help us with the resolution. Sacramento County has declared the elimination of alcohol and other drug abuse as one of its highest priorities. Research has documented the effectiveness of alcohol and other drug treatment and recovery programs, as well as found that for every dollar invested in treatment, communities reap financial savings due to the reduced costs in criminal justice, health, and welfare intervention, as well as costs to business and industry associated with loss of productivity and absenteeism. So there's a little bit of a program. I'm just going to say that the board does declare September 2018 as Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month in Sacramento County, and expresses appreciation and support for the good work and assistance provided by alcohol and other drug prevention, treatment, and recovery programs. And I have two resolutions. Do they both go to you, or?
One goes to Kathy.
Okay. Okay. So I'll hand you that one, and you get this one.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, if you, I understand you want to speak something. You want a picture over here?
Yeah. You guys can come.
Thank you very much. Recovery happens.
Well, we got to go. Oh, you want him to come up on the stairs, if you would. It's a little easier.
You guys have them all.
Put in. Gooch. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Podium's yours now.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other members of the board. My name is Lori Miller. I am the Alcohol and Drug Services Division Manager with the Department of Health Services. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you this morning to celebrate those in recovery and to help proclaim September 2018 as Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month in Sacramento County. Sacramento County Alcohol and Drug Services is also promoting Recovery Happens. It is the 26th anniversary of this statewide event and rally held at the west steps of the state capitol on September 5th. The event is organized by CCAP, the California Consortium of Addiction Programs and Professionals, to increase awareness and understanding of mental health and substance use disorders, and to honor and celebrate those in recovery. This year's theme, Join the Voices for Recovery, Invest in Health, Home, Purpose, and Community, is so important as it really speaks to the areas that contribute to a person's healing, wellness, living a sober and productive lifestyle, and improving their chances for success. Prevention and substance use disorder treatment works, recovery is possible, and it is important to bring this awareness to our community. We have 3 testimonials this morning of individuals who are true success stories. They have utilized the county service system and are a living testimony that recovery does happen and people do change their lives. I am very proud and honored to introduce our guest speakers. First, you will hear from Deanna Lopez, 12 years in recovery. She is a court services supervisor with WellSpace Health. Next will be Ron Smith, 12 years in recovery. He is a reentry counselor with the Rio Consumnes Correctional Center. And lastly, William Rhodes, 11 years in recovery. He is a student of social work at the California State University of Sacramento. Deanna, would you come up, please?
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Deanna Lopez, and I have been clean from methamphetamine addiction for over 12 years. I started using drugs when I was only 11 years old. I spent 15 years of my life using drugs. At the end, I was pregnant, unemployed, homeless, and living in my car. I couldn't stop using, and I didn't know how to get help. The day that I finally went into labor was terrifying. I had no prenatal care and used drugs throughout my entire pregnancy. I had no idea what to expect and was horrified at the idea of what may have happened to my baby. On June 17th, 2006, my daughter was born perfectly healthy, and that was my moment of clarity. It was in that moment that I realized maybe God had a plan for my life that was much different than mine. A couple days later, I received a visit from CPS. They were the first ones to offer me help, and I gladly accepted. Once involved with CPS, I began working with a social worker. She was supportive and reassuring. She encouraged me to be healthy for my newborn baby. I was also teamed up with a recovery specialist from the STARS program. She was empathetic, and she never made me feel ashamed about my addiction. I entered treatment at Strategies for Change perinatal program. The focus was helping women with children overcome substance abuse. My counselor encouraged me to set goals for my life. Because of her, I found a job and went back to school. I had an amazing team of people who supported me and taught me to be a woman of integrity. The services I completed inspired me to give back to the recovery community. I began school at CCAP, and I was surrounded by some truly incredible people. I obtained my first job working for New Dawn Recovery Center and eventually became a counselor. After 2 years, I began working at the STARS program along with CPS, the same program that had helped save my life years before. I worked there for 6 years as a recovery specialist, company trainer, and ultimately a supervisor. Currently, I work at Wellspace Health as the court services supervisor for the collaborative courts of Sacramento County. We help provide substance abuse treatment for multiple courts, including mental health court, reentry, adult drug court, Prop 36, and DUI treatment court. 4 years ago, I began teaching as an instructor at CCAP. I now have the opportunity to train future substance abuse counselors. The work we do has directly impacted the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people in our community. Today, I'm a mother, a homeowner, an asset to my employers, a friend, and an active participant in the 12-step community. My beautiful daughter is now 12 years old. She is an honor roll student in advanced courses. She has been involved in performing arts, choir, sports, band, student council, and she has even studied multiple languages. It is her personal goal to attend Stanford University, and she has set her sights on a future in law. She is loved and she believes in herself. She knows that anything is possible because she has witnessed the success of her mother and her father, who once had nothing but now have it all. It is in the darkest moments that we find our greatest strength. One of my greatest strengths is now helping others overcome substance abuse and find a new way to live. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Good story.
I'm going to raise this up. Well, good morning. Well, my name is Ron Smith. I'm 54 years old. Been clean and sober for the last 13 years. My drug of choice was crack cocaine for over 10 years. What turned my life to recovery was my mother demonstrated tough love by not letting me in her house one day. Another friend of mine made a statement that you don't want your mom to die while you're on drugs. Certain county services I used included GA, food stamps, clothing and work tool vouchers, Francis House for bus passes and hygiene, Friendship Park for coffee and donuts, Loaves and Fishes for lunch, showers, and clothing exchange, Back to Work program downtown 29th and R, MAP for DUI classes, Salvation Army residential, and Union Gospel Mission shelter. Recovery is important to me because I like being available and present in life. Giving back is what fuels my desire to stay on the path to positive change. Future aspiration for the recovery world is that it's becoming more evident through various outlets such as prison reentry programs, Prop 47 Steps to Success program, and other wraparound services like this show that life on drugs or incarceration is not a fulfilling life at all. Again, I was addicted to cocaine for over 10 years, and the addiction and my compulsive behavior landed me in jail. 8 different drug programs, family separation, divorce, and homelessness, engaging in crime to fuel my addiction. There was a time where I couldn't hold on to $20 without making a beeline to the dope spot. I was a hot mess. But in 2005, I finally began the quest to turn my life around. I learned to overcome the phenomenon of craving to use drugs. With the building of a strong support system, including family, friends, and pursuing a new career, my life has never been the same. I utilize Sacramento shelters, residential treatment facilities, support group meetings, my local church, and going back to school to discover my unique fingerprint to recovery and purpose in life, which all work together to reduce the risk of relapse and recidivism. This all led to eventually working in the prison I used to be locked up in, teaching classes at a drug program I graduated from, and remarrying the love of my life, Cheryl. We were married 8 years, divorced for 8 years, remarried on the 8th month, on the 8th day in 2008. Thank God for new beginnings. Which you can also read about in a new book I just wrote entitled Delivered to Choices, which is available today through Amazon.com. Thanks for your support and inviting me here today.
Thanks, Ron.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is William Rhodes, and I'm 57 years old, and currently I'm a social work major at Sacramento State University. but I'm also a recovering addict. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Professor Elizabeth Contreras, who presented me with this opportunity to speak here today. And I'd like to thank the board for having me, and it's hoped that my story of addiction and recovery can somehow offer some insight into the personalized struggles of addiction, and hopefully the value of rehabilitation and recovery programs. Having said that, my story of addiction is probably similar to that of many other addicts. I used drugs for over 20 years, and those drugs included PCP, LSD, crack cocaine, and speed. The genesis of my contact with drugs, I believe, can be traced to the all too familiar feelings of trying to fit in with the wrong crowd, but also the common frustrations associated with issues surrounding race and socioeconomic status and poverty. Social factors that I believe strongly influence some of the bad choices that I've made in life. But having said that, if I would describe my personal experiences of addiction to you today, I would describe it in this way. It's like you step into a black hole and you begin to fall faster and faster into the darkness. At first, you try to brace yourself and stop yourself, but you panic, realizing that you're powerless to do so. So you eventually give up and let go. As you accelerate into the darkness, you lose yourself. And at some point, you forget who you were. And perhaps you become something different altogether. When many people speak of addiction, they often make reference to hitting bottom. For me, that bottom involved the loss of a very good job, but more importantly, the loss of precious and valuable relationships, some that are still in disrepair today. But the eventual loss of my freedom, my ultimate bottom. But while I was going through this period, I read this quote that said, and to kind of put things in perspective for me, it says, sometimes you have to lose your life in order to find your life. And while incarcerated, I spent several years in recovery programs trying to figure out and connect the dots as to the hows and why. How and why did I end up in such a dark place? And as a result, I thought I was a person of no value. But in recovery programs, I met professionals, counselors, and therapists that somehow made me believe in myself again. And I think they were able to do this by simply giving me that unconditional positive regard without judgment, listening with sincere empathy and genuine concern to my story, and meeting me exactly where I was in my journey, not where they wanted me to be, excuse me. But more importantly, they kept reinforcing the fact that if I could somehow separate myself from the many tragic manifestations of addiction, a person of value could be found at the core of my person. And I had to believe that, and I was challenged morally, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And this experience not only restored my belief in myself again, but in the goodness and humanity. Humans helping other humans because it's the right thing to do. It's this belief in the goodness and humanity and the self-righting abilities of the individual, I believe, is what the heart of what rehabilitation recovery is all about. There are a lot of good people buried beneath the throes of addiction. Addiction is a very serious social problem that's affecting our communities. One of the reasons that I wanted to speak here today, and my overall message is this: rehabilitation recovery is about saving lives. It's about the people who have momentarily given up on themselves and need advocates, inspirations, and collaborators in order to change their life. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Laureate, is that your entire presentation? Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming in and telling us your stories. It's helpful to know when we usually hear the other side of it. So it's good to know that there is potential for recovery. It's very nice. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Cerna.
Thank you. Yeah, I too want to express my thanks for you being here and being so forthright about your experiences. And we, on occasion, here in these chambers, hear these types of testimonials, and perhaps once in a while we'll hear them out in our districts when we're visiting clinics or talking to folks, even on the campaign trail. But these are some of the most poignant reminders of not just the fragility of who we are as human beings, but certainly how strong we are and can be. And so I would just, if you're not doing it, please spread the word beyond these chambers, and I'm sure you're probably doing that. But I would, my office is open to you as a resource to help do that, certainly in the district I represent. I've certainly been very affected by hearing testimonials from others, including those that are addicted to opioids. We all know how deep that challenge is for this community and for communities across the country. And I've seen some incredible willpower expressed by those who have overcome addiction. So I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, and please lean on us, lean on me to help you do it. Thanks.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, I would just add that very powerful words, very powerful stories, and thank the three of you for sharing. And I know you have others who could share similar stories, but your life stories thus far, I think, are, again, show the fragility of human nature, but also show the willpower and determination. And that, I think, as a couple of you alluded to, and one of you said very clearly, I think the humanity that's shown to one another, that people can come out of that darkness. And again, your words and your life stories are helping others to do that. So you're quite an inspiration, and I was very moved this morning by your thoughts, your comments, and sharing that. So thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you all. Okay, we have some off-agenda speakers I'd like to go into next. Mr. Marin, you have a group of 6. So do you want, we have a 2-minute limit. Is that what you want to do, or do you want 15 minutes and you work off of that?
We'll certainly conclude our remarks within 15 minutes. My thought is I'm just going to lead off, and then we'll go down the row as individual members step forward. But first, Madam Chair, good morning, and members of the Board of Supervisors, good morning. My name is Mark Marin, and I've been negotiator for the Sacramento County Architects and Professional Engineers, a union unit to which provides critical services across the board to Sacramento County to maintain the infrastructure. And the individual members of the negotiating committee will step forward and tell you a little more in depth about their work. Why we're here this morning is that over 20 years of negotiations, I have never met such intransigence and unreasonableness at the table. And it would be one thing if we were dealing directly with the management, knowledgeable people representing the county, but they are pointing to the Board of Supervisors as the source of the positions that are being taken at the table. And in short, what we have gotten is consistent rejection of every non-economic proposal that's been made to the county negotiators. And when we finally, in an attempt to just get to some point where we could meet, stripped away all of those proposals and just put 5 very simple, direct proposals to the county, they were all rejected in toto. So that right now we are at impasse with the county. And what that means, we've been without a contract since the end of June, but what that means is that the people who are placed in critical positions in the sewage treatment plant, in the county traffic control center, throughout the county, are faced with the prospect of doing something to show how critical they are to the county. And I hope that doesn't happen. And to the extent that you, through your meetings with the members of the negotiating committee, can give them some instructions, let's get to conclusion. Let's have a reasonable contract. As it is, there is nothing on the table, and there is actual diminution of real wages that we have already suffered and will continue to suffer if something isn't done, and done soon. Now, with that, I'd just like to introduce our president, Nan Bailey. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think I need to lower this a little.
Maybe Flo, you could help? I don't know which button it is there. I couldn't find it myself.
This one? Okay, thank you.
That's plenty.
Thank you. Good morning,
Good morning,
Chair, Madam Chair, and Board of Supervisors. My name is Nan Bailey. I'm an associate civil engineer. I'm the president of APEX. APEX represents 2 bargaining units, Unit 022, which is the non-supervisory, and 023, which is the supervisory classes for
professional engineers, land surveyors, and architects within the county. We have about 250 members currently, and they are employed in the public works departments, municipal services, and some special districts, such as the Sanitation Districts Agency, Department of Transportation, Waste Management and Recycling, all of which these departments are considered enterprise funds. They do not impact the general fund at all, so regardless of whether we get a raise or not, there is no impact to the general fund. Even though we are small in number, the jobs that we do for the county are not. We provide professional engineering services and project management oversight for some very large projects that have currently been constructed and for projects that will be constructed in the future, such as the Sacramento International Airport expansion and that new massive parking structure, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade known as Echo Water, I've been employed with the county for 16 continuous years and have worked on projects like septic conversion. I'm currently the project manager for the Echo Water Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan program that we have. It's a $1.56 billion loan with the state. I coordinate the activities to make sure that the district is, Regional SAN is in compliance with that loan. And I would like to have the rest of my team members talk about the negotiations that we've been going through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sonia Hernandez.
Oh, this doesn't go any further down, huh? I can put this down more.
That's fine.
I'm a little bit vertically inclined here. Yeah. Okay. Hello, board. My name is Sonia Hernandez, and I'm an associate transportation engineer for Sacramento County Transportation Department. I have been a county employee for a little over 20 years now. I've enjoyed working for the county. I love being a public servant. But today I just want to talk about a little bit about what our group does. It's a small group. We're only about 250 engineers. But I just want to ask a question to everybody here today. I would like to ask everybody if they took a shower this morning. Or maybe, did you have a drink of a clean glass of water today? Or maybe used a restroom? Did you drive to work on a paved roadway? Or maybe did you cross a bridge safely? Did you cross a busy intersection safely because the traffic signals were timed properly? If you said yes to any of these questions, then you have benefited from the hardworking county engineers who are providing every day to assure the health and safety and improved quality of life to all residents of Sacramento County. County engineers are responsible for improving, designing, maintaining the environment in which we all live in. Engineers plan, design, and oversee county construction and maintain all infrastructure, such as roadways, bridges, buildings, water and sewer systems. County engineers take pride in their work. They are dedicated in making sure the 1.5 million residents of Sacramento County are able to have access to safe drinking water, have access to a paved roadway network that they can drive on, a safe bridge to cross, and have reliable sewer systems. I would hope the county also recognizes and values the engineers' daily contributions that affect the quality of life of all residents of Sacramento County. Last night I was online reviewing Sacramento County's mission, vision, and values statement. I'm not going to read it all, but something really stuck out to me. And it was the part where it talks about values. This portion mentions county employees. The portion states the following: Sacramento County values are basic principles and beliefs for the County of Sacramento. They govern the way we make and carry our decisions. Our values for Sacramento County are honesty, integrity, and respect for the individual. Recognition of employee contributions. Recognition of employee contributions. That really stuck to me. After reading that, I only have one question to the county. How can Sacramento County say it's abiding by its basic value statement when the county has consistently refused to give its engineers a pay increase for the last 12 years? By the county continuing to refuse a minimal equity increase sends a very clear message to all county engineers. And that message is that Sacramento County doesn't value and doesn't respect the contributions the engineers provide to residents of Sacramento County. Would you continue working for an employer who doesn't value your work, or for the last 12 years has not properly compensated you? County engineers are currently being paid below the median, and if this new contract does not properly address the pay deficiency, the county will be seeing engineers leaving in droves for better paying jobs, jeopardizing public safety and the quality of life of the residents of Sacramento County. I hope the county really does follow its mission, vision, and value statement. Actions speak louder than words. We are hoping the county can finally give our engineers the equity increase that is well deserved before it's too late. All we are asking for is for the county to start appreciating and valuing the contributions that the engineers provide to the residents of Sacramento County. Thank you.
Thank you. Augustin Lopez.
Good morning. My name is Agustin Lopez, Associate Civil Engineer with the Sanitation Districts. Been with the county for over 25 years. Started in human resources of all places, went over to water resources, construction inspection, and then sewer district. And in those 25 plus years, I've seen a lot of contracts. This year, I decided to be a part of the team, negotiating team, to do my part to help out my colleagues. And in my line of work, I deal with very irrational people at times, so I gotta say the county's kind of up there. It's disappointing, it's frustrating. One thing we're seeing with our members is, Sonia just touched on it briefly, we're losing quality, experienced people. That institutional knowledge is gone. We're also seeing that we're having to bring in people at higher steps just to get them on board. And we feel that trend will continue. The county wants us to be middle of the road in terms of salary. The truth is we don't do middle of the road work. That's all I have. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Jason Bailey.
Hello, my name is Jason Bailey, and I'm an assistant engineer for the sanitary sewer district. I'm definitely the youngest person on our board and a part of these negotiations, and it's really disheartening to see the way that the county continues to engage us in the negotiations we're having. It's clear that they don't value the work that we do, and between their inadequate class comparisons and complete failure to recognize the recent and dramatic increases toward employee retirement contributions, the county promises to hold our wages firmly below median. That's an issue for me. That's an issue for my colleagues. Looking forward to where we're going to be working in the future. It's hard to see a future with the county if they won't even hold us to their own standard of median. In a time of decaying infrastructure, there are real costs and consequences toward aiming below median. The work of county engineers and the decisions we make will impact the future of the county for decades to come.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Keith Johnson.
Good morning to you all. I'm a county employee, assistant engineer with the Department of Transportation. I've been a county employee for over 28 years. I've participated in many contract negotiations. This time around has been the worst I've experienced. We've put forth many reasonable proposals, nearly all of which have been met with the same statement: the county is not interested in that. It makes us wonder, what is the county interested in? The impression we're getting is that keeping employee wages and benefits as low as possible is the only consideration. This has a very negative effect on employee morale, because we know the funds are available to compensate us fairly, but what we are hearing is that you don't care if your employees are falling behind. Based on the amount of non-essential spending being approved by this board, it is clear you have the money to treat your employees fairly. We hope that you will decide to put money towards something that is essential, and that is the employees that support the infrastructure that your citizens depend on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I think that's all of your speakers, Mr. Marin.
That is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
As you know, we don't comment on items that are off agenda, so thank you for coming in today and letting us know how you feel. And we'll move on to our next item.
Item 44 is the Antelope Public Facilities Financing Plan Development Impact Fee Program update. Determine that the environmental analysis is adequate and complete. Adopt resolution approving the update. Adopt resolution approving the revised Sacramento County Transportation Development Fee Schedule. Introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 16.8 of the Sacramento County Code for the Antelope Public Facilities Financing Plan 2018 update. Waive full reading of the ordinance and continue to September 11th for adoption.
Good morning, Bob Davison, Division Chief of the County Engineering Division, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you. So today's actions are, first, take action on the environmental document, approve an ordinance to amend the county code, and today you'll be introducing that ordinance and continuing it for adoption. And adopt a resolution approving the 2018 edition of the finance plan and fee program. And that resolution also includes the nexus findings that are required by the government code for such a fee program update. And then also adopt a resolution approving the Sacramento County Transportation Development Fee, which I'll be calling the SCTDF for most of this presentation, the schedule for Antelope. And the reason for that coming here is that if you change the Antelope, what's in the Antelope CIP, it has effect on the SCTDF fee because Antelope gets a credit for the overlap from what's in the Antelope fee program CIP and what's in the SCTDF. So when you change one, you have to change the other. So with that, a little bit of background. Antelope was one of the initial impact fee programs in the county, first adopted in 1986. The most recent update was in 2005, and this plan spreads the burden of infrastructure required for the Antelope plan area to develop to the projects that are in the Antelope plan area. Fees are collected at building permit, anywhere in the 2,800 acres. And just to give you a little perspective, for dwelling unit equivalents are different for each component, but in looking at the remaining development, we're 82% developed if you look at the roadway dwelling unit equivalents with only 2,355 remaining. So this slide shows the fee program area, and with this update, we're actually introducing the subzone concept. It just makes it easier to address the different things happening fee-wise in the different subzones. Subzone 1 represents the original Antelope area, and the fees paid from the development that was originally approved with the Antelope Antelope development area. Subzone 2 includes the East Antelope specific plan area, which has been separated into a western, a northern, and a central sub-area. So with this subzone 2, those developments would pay the original Antelope fees plus the sub-area fees, which basically took local roads related to the East Antelope specific plan and allocated them to these subzones, and that fee is on top of the normal Antelope fees. And then subzone 3 represents projects that were conditioned to pay the roadway fee, but weren't actually included in the Antelope plan area. This update brings those projects and those improvements into the Antelope plan. So with the major roadway fee, and it's certainly the largest fee, and what's interesting is it's a pretty significant reduction, going from $12,598 per dwelling unit equivalent to $7,296 per dwelling unit equivalent. There's more to the story, and that's why we're also taking action on the SCTDF. Part of this is to take projects which are regional in nature that were in the Antelope plan and have them being transferred to the SCTDF program. It's a strategy that is happening here, and it's actually being worked on by Department of Transportation, looking at a lot of plan areas throughout the county, and your board will be seeing future action related on that. So with that, the Antelope fee gets reduced, and the SCTDF is proposed to be increased. The credit will be reduced because of the projects being transferred to the SCTDF program. So that actually reduces the credit that the Antelope plan area gets, and it increases the fee that the Antelope developers will pay to the SCTDF. So combined, it's still a reduction from about $17,800 per dwelling unit equivalent to about $15,900 per dwelling unit equivalent. So with that, other changes that were made also were to bring the subzone 3 projects into the plan capital improvement program, and completed projects were removed from the CIP, and overall cost estimates were updated. This slide shows some of the key projects that will be happening in the near future, and some changes that have happened on some of these projects. First of all, at the Walerga-Alverta intersection, there's a restriping project. The Walerga Road Big Cloud Way, reconstructing that, realigning that intersection to accommodate the western leg. It's mostly construction of the western leg. The Antelope Road extension, the long-awaited extension of Antelope Road to Alverta Road, is a significant project that will be happening in the near future. Note that the Alverta Road connection back to Antelope Road is not shown at this time, but that's actually one of the projects that's proposed to be moved to the SCTDF. However, that is a project that the Barrett Ranch developers, East developers, will be constructing. Don Julio has some significant improvements. It was always planned to widen Don Julio. I was out in the Antelope community, and they schooled me that it's Don Julio, not Don Julio. So I apologize to the Antelope community for that, and I'll try to say Don Julio. I've been saying Don Julio probably since early 90s, so.
Well, we recognize it either way.
Okay. So anyway, that will be widened to 4 lanes, but also based on new county standards, there will be landscape medians constructed within that road, and those weren't included in the original plan. And there will be some resurfacing and other improvements to that road. There is also going to be a significant realignment to the Titan Drive, Poker Lane, Don Julio intersection, and that's to accommodate a heritage oak tree that's located just along Titan Drive. That was also an issue that came from the community, and so this plan accommodates that, and it includes the total realignment of that intersection and a 500-foot intersection leg on a Titan Drive that's aligned to the north of the tree so that the tree is saved. Okay, as far as the East Antelope local road fee, it's also important to again point out that the western sub-area is completely developed. The northern sub-area is developed except for maybe one project that could happen into the future, but there's no activity on that. And so rather than having 3 sub-areas, we're proposing this one subzone and to just have one proposed fee, which would be $2,959 per dwelling unit equivalent. And so for this East Antelope local roadway fee, we updated the cost estimate for the one improvement, which is the Lewis Avenue extension and the gas line relocation related to that project. So with that, certainly the administration of this will be simpler with one fee rather than 3 fees. So the Parks and Recreation fee is also being adjusted. It's proposed to be increased from $5,065 to $6,459. In general, cost estimates were updated for all remaining projects in the capital improvement program. And this slide shows most of the parks in the capital improvement program. There's a couple of parks that are already constructed that aren't shown in this slide. Pacoma Park is completed, so nothing's happening there. Blue Oak Park still will include a phase 2 expansion, and it may expand towards Willarga, but properties have not been acquired for that park expansion. This Blue Oak also phase 2 improvements are included in the remaining capital improvement program as well. The Antelope Community Park it's mostly there. There's about 3 more acres or so that are going to be added, and then phase 2 and phase 3 improvements are going to be added with the remaining capital improvement program for the park. I do want to point out that based on community input, some facilities were removed, and 2 soccer fields, a dog park, and a concession stand are being added to the community park and are included in the capital improvement program. And just south of Titan Drive, you'll see a Park Site E, and that is a turnkey park that the Barrett Ranch East developers are going to provide and be reimbursed for from this fee program. So that will be, I believe, the first turnkey park that happened in the Antelope area. And then I mentioned the oak tree before. There's a very small park that we'll call it the Oak Tree Park, that with that preserved heritage oak. There will be some fencing and some small improvements that are done right around that oak tree that will hopefully help in its preservation and enjoyment of the area. And then finally, just a couple of tennis courts are being added to Firestone Park and Roseview Park, which is not on the slide.
Okay, before you move on, there's a question.
Yeah.
Mr. Natoli?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As it relates to Antelope Community Center, then it was not easily understandable, at least for me, on page 24 of the report on the phase 3 improvements, Bob, that there's a partial contribution from the current development proposal. How far away are they from getting the funds necessary with build out on the west side, this being a significant segment of filling in some of the suburban development there? Where are they in that, and is the district close to achieving the amount of funding they need to do that? And how was 12.1%? I don't know if that was the adjusted increase or if that's the contribution towards this from this particular development.
So that, yes, the last time this program was updated, that was a component that was added, and at that time Antelope, had been significantly developed, so the first portions of Antelope that came through did not pay that component. I believe it was added either in 2003 or 2005. So it would only certainly collect a small percentage of that community center. But I know this board actually directed staff to, the original presentation did not include that component, and this board directed that staff revise the plan to include that component. And with that, so that component has remained. The cost adjustments was applied to that component. And as far as your question on whether there's enough money elsewhere, I would have to defer to the Park District to answer that, and there's Park District staff here today.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is that obviously the Antelope community's been under development for better part of 40 years now in one segment or the other there, and to not have a community center after a generation or two of residents, recognizing obviously you need critical mass and the way we fund things is different. It seemed to me before another generation of Antelope residents moves in and moves out that there should be the opportunity, again, working with the Park District, to have a community center. And because this is a good portion of the remaining developable area, maybe with a few spots still there, it was seen to me that in the discussions, and I guess I'd like to hear, certainly after you're done with the presentation from the Park District, and maybe from you, but certainly from the developer representatives, it was seen to me that when a community is built out for the generations to come, that you ought to have a community center. When you look at activities for all types of age groups and such, I think it's a real shortfall and a shortcoming if a community doesn't have a community center, particularly one of this size. And obviously it's not in part of the area of the county that I represent immediately, but I can tell you how critical that is to other areas that are developing throughout the southern part of the county, both in and out of municipalities that I represent. And I just think that the time has come for this community to have that community center. And again, it doesn't necessarily fall all to the backs of the current development, but if this is kind of the end game, and that's the amount of money that's going to be achieved, and and again, I want to hear how much shortfall there is, I think there needs to be a way determined before this leaves this board's hands as to how that community center is going to be funded and constructed in a timely fashion, recognizing that, several decades have passed from the initial houses being constructed in the Antelope community to now, and this being a significant portion of the remaining undevelopable lands or developable lands now. And I guess I just raised that question because you're right, we had that discussion before. It's an added component, but if it's only 10 or 12% of the total amount and there's only X amount in the bank, I guess I need to hear from somebody as to how that community center is going to be built for existing residents, but for future residents as well. So that's my point. So maybe after you complete your presentation.
Ask the parks.
Yeah, parks and,
Let's come up when Bob's finished.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide and the last slide. There's two minor mitigation fees that were included. Drainage Basin A was to mitigate impacts in Placer County. The water mitigation fee was to mitigate for some water lines that would need to be extended through the Poker Lane area based on new development and concerns about the groundwater. And as of now, we've met with Placer County, we've met with the County Water Agency, and we've met with the Sac Suburban Water District, and the need for these fees is no longer there. So we're recommending the elimination of these fees. And future agreements will come back to your board regarding the remaining funds in the fee components and spending those on the original purposes of what the fees were collected for. So with that, the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that this was quite a unique project. Typically, we come up with a draft and we outreach it to the development community, and based on direction that came from this board and requests from active developers, we entered into a partnering relationship that included many meetings and discussions, but they were very proactive. And so rather than us coming up with a plan and development not liking it and going back and forth, we worked with the development interest, and I think the process worked out good, and in the end you have a final product, and nobody's here hopefully saying it's not so, but with that I just wanted to point out that the process was different, but in my mind successful. Okay. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and if you have any questions.
I don't have anybody punched up for any marks, additional comments, but the Park District, I don't know who's here from the Park District. Couldn't see you back there, Dave.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Board. Dave Mitchell. I'm the District Administrator with Sunrise Recreation and Park District. And As far as related to the community center got added to the financing plan, as Bob said, a few years ago when most of Antelope was already built. The cost estimate for the community center at that point was $3 million, which probably was a little underfunded even back when it was added into the program at that point. I've built 2 community centers in the last 8 years. One of them was $7 million, one of them was $26 million. Just kind of depends on the flavor of the community center, what's added into the into this center, what the community needs. Mr. Natoli, I thank you for your comments. I also agree that the Antelope community deserves a community center representative of that community. So I would anticipate the community center, the needs when we go out and start talking specifically about what the community wants in the community center, that it's going to include teen centers and senior centers and gymnasiums and the rest of the bells and whistles that kind of go with it, which the price tag will go up. So I'm very thankful that the board is taking into consideration the community center. My fear at this point is it will be woefully underfunded, and certainly not because of the development community's efforts. They've certainly been putting money into it. Just the project got added late into the financing plan. So most of the development in Antelope had already kind of happened before it got added in. So my belief right now as far as funding the community center is that the money is being collected right now, the 12.1%, and or the $500,000 or so that'll end up at the end of the day, will be good seed money for grant applications and for design and development of the center, but the actual funding for the center is still something that I don't have a crystal ball for or have figured out at this point. One of the things that runs around our office anyway, hopefully would be the ability for us to put a community center in a joint build, such as when Antelope needs a new fire station or a police substation and or a new library, things like this. We might be able to do a joint build in that sort of a way and come up with some funding in that way. But right now there is not a financing plan for the center itself.
That answer your question?
Yeah, if I just could follow on. So thank you, Dave. So do I understand correctly then, at the end of the day, when the current development proposal that's under this financing plan, that you will, after all the houses are built, you only have $534,000? Is that's it towards the community center?
Correct.
Was there any discussion, I guess, at certainly with the development team that's proposing this development, recognizing that, yes, a lot of development already went forward. There was, and if I understood Bob correctly, this got added in 2003, is that right?
Either 3 or... I think in 5, actually.
Okay.
It was either 3 or 5 for sure.
Okay, but so in 13 years, we have what's in the account now?
I don't have that number.
Our records show about $120,000 has been collected.
Wow. That's it?
Thank you. Most of the time between 05, as you know, was the recession and not a lot of building.
Yeah, well, there was but recession hit in 07, 08, and yes, it slowed down significantly, if not to ground to a halt. But I guess I'm just, I make the point because, again, Park District certainly has, a certain level of responsibility in all this, but it seems to me that it's not just woefully underfunded, that $500,000 won't get you architectural drawings for a community center, I trust. And it's not even including, soft costs aren't included in this as I read this chart. And I guess I just put it out there for our discussion, again, recognizing that, we have this before us today. But at the end of the day, you got $120,000 in the bank, you're gonna have $534,000, you won't even keep up with inflation with that. And I guess it just seems to me that from a park standpoint that, I guess the overall fee here is about $6,000, is that? Because I know in other districts we're looking at, and again, the areas that I represent, the park
about
fee
$6,500 approximately.
may be significantly different, and part of that is because the level of facilities. And again, it doesn't all fall to one developer here, but I guess I'm just going to make the case here today that we ought to take a closer look at this, because otherwise you're going to be at a serious disadvantage, and the residents, are not going to have a community center anytime in the foreseeable future, because I don't think the money's going to fall out of the sky. And again, I can't say that you would finance it totally from this, but this still seems like all you're adding is about $380,000 from the new developments proposed. That's nominal in the scheme of things. So I guess that's my point. Again, it's a dilemma obviously your district has, but I certainly see some responsibility by this board to have maybe a more in-depth discussion about that community center component, particularly if over the last 13 years, recession or not, we've only accumulated less than $10,000 a year. That to me seems, pitiful.
Supervisor Frost?
So we had a short discussion yesterday, and I know there was a public process, and I know we were trying to figure out how to pencil this finance plan. Mm-hmm. And I also agree that a community center is important, but I have the impression, and let me know if I'm wrong, Dave, that in the community of Antelope, what it seems really important to everyone is that they have plenty of soccer fields. The community has never come out and asked me to work on a community center, so I'm not sure that's been on the forefront of their minds. Maybe you know something I don't know. But it seems like the soccer fields and the dog park were a priority, and Antelope had other dreams, like they wanted to have a center of town, and they wanted economic development so that they could have a sit-down restaurant, and that they wanted to improve the conditions in their business corridor with less homeless people. So tell me what your thoughts are based on your feedback from the community right now.
Thank you. I certainly don't speak for the Antelope community, but when I'm out in the community listening to the comments that are shared with me, the number one need, as far as related to parks, the number one need easily is the dog park requests. The second request I usually get is around soccer fields or multi-use sports fields, soccer, football, either of those types of fields. There's been a lot of conversation about the tree that's at the corner of Poker and Don Julio. And then it comes up every now and then about the community center would probably be the fourth thing that comes up as far as in Parks and Recreation.
I think they're using the library and the gyms at the high school right now kind of as a community center option. But yeah, I agree. We should have a community center. I also want to make sure that we can make this plan doable for the developers, because those roads that are connected are probably the most important thing, not just to Antelope, to everyone who drives through Antelope to get somewhere else. I mean, that's the major thing on everyone's mind. When is this coming? It can't come fast enough for the community, because they want those connectors between Antelope and Alberta and Titan.
Yeah, certainly the community meetings that I've attended where roadways and parks have been part of the conversation. Roadways improvements have been number one as far as the community asking for, so I totally agree with that. What I would propose is that we have a conversation with the community, which we're going to be doing fairly soon, because to put in the dog park and the soccer fields, we'll be entertaining public meetings with the Antelope community, and then get a gauge a little bit about the community center portion. As my earlier comments, depending on how big and how many bells and whistles you add to the community center, price tags are all over the place as far as that. And maybe at that time, if the board is so willing, that we might have a conversation back at that time about what the community is looking for and how we might possibly move forward in funding that.
Yeah, because I think community center is important too. Just don't want to put a monkey wrench in what we're working on right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
No further comments from the board at the moment. This is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing, and I do have one speaker signed up to speak, George Carpenter. If anyone else is here to speak on this item, please fill out a speaker sheet and give it to our clerk.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm George Carpenter, Vice President of Wind Communities. We're a landowner in within the finance plan area, and that project was before the board in April 2017, and that project was ultimately sued, but the lawsuit was settled, and we rolled up our sleeves with staff and started working on the finance plan update, and we got such a good feeling at the start of the process, we began the design and engineering of over $1 million, of spending $1 million to get that project off the ground to fix some roads, and your approval today is going to facilitate us spending $10 million on road improvements in an area where they're sorely needed and where the community is asking for them and where the county has no other source of funding. And so it's really a significant step that you're taking, hopefully today, to approve this. I want to address something that Bob Davison said about the collaborative relationship working with this. He really undersold it. Staff rolled up their sleeves on a lot of very complicated, difficult issues where we didn't see eye to eye, but Mike Penrose stayed the course with Bob Davison, Ron Vicari working with us on the transportation issues and the finance plan issues, and really just brought this thing home. And it was not easy, and so I want to say thank you to them, and then also mention Dave Mitchell at the Park District, because it was there's a lot of needs in the community, but not a lot of funding sources, and so the team should really be credited for all the work that they did. We did have some questions about how credits and reimbursements were going to work, and staff jumped right on that, explained it to us. We got a chance to see the staff report when it came out on Friday, and we're happy with where that's landing, and have a good feeling with the Antelope financing plan, and then the SCTDF. I hate using acronyms, but that's going to be, an update's going to be coming before your board, and we have a good feeling about the direction of that. So we're very happy with the way this is playing out. The one thing I would want to address, the community center, and that issue was raised as we did the finance plan update, and we pushed back on that because not saying that the community doesn't need a community center, but we think there is a community center already in motion with the new Performing Arts Center that the high school district is building right out at the front of their campus right next to our project. I think it's going to be like a $10 to $20 million multi-use facility that is going to act and be a central gathering place where members of the community can use. And it is on the existing high school campus, which is next to the Aquatic Center. So it might not be a Sunrise Park and Rec District operated community center, but it's definitely a community gathering point, and we're going to be connecting some key roads right into that and just really open up that area for business. So, we're really excited about how this is going to work out, and just hope that you can approve this today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? None? Oh, Ms. Frost?
About the SCTDF coming before us in the future, there will be an amendment. Is that what, regarding Barrett Ranch, or the fees, how they're applied?
Yeah, there will be modifications done to the SCTDF, to that plan, that'll include infrastructure that will be built by the Barrett Ranch or the Antelope area, but specifically the Barrett Ranch development. And through that update, that infrastructure that they'll be obligated to construct will be creditable, which was kind of the dialogue we were most recently having.
And thank you very much, all of you who worked on this to make this possible. This was quite a lot of meetings and conversations and expertise to go back and figure out how to make it work, and you did, and thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in the public hearing? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from the board?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay. Call your next item.
Okay. Item 45 is the public hearing on the benefit category changes and levy of increased service charges for the Barrett Ranch East development within Zone 1 of County Service Area Number 1.
Mr. Davison.
Good morning again. Bob Davison with County Engineering. And this is also related to the Barrett Ranch East development, and it's a benefit category change in County Service Area Number 1 based on their conditions of development for a benefit category change and increased service charges. So with that, I recommend that your board open the public hearing and consider any testimony. And when you close the hearing, direct the clerk to tabulate the 2 returned protest ballots. And then based on the results of those protest ballots, there will be some further action.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Any comments from the public? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and direct the clerk to tabulate the protest ballots, if any.
Let me open them both first and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we have two ballots. The first one, the legal owner is Barrett Wynn LLC and Antelope RBVP LP. Site address, Don Julio Boulevard and Antelope Road, Antelope, California 95843, voting yes. And then the other ballot is the legal owner, Raynon Bardis Barrett LP, Antelope, the address is Antelope Road, Antelope, California 95843, voting yes.
Okay,
So
no
with
protest ballots.
with those results, certainly there is no majority protest. So that now your board may take action on the remaining item to adopt the resolution. But I do want to point out that Section 2 and Section 3 have blanks that need to be filled in. So I'll refer to Section 2. At the close of the hearing, the board had received 0 written protest, and in Section 3, at the close of the tabulation, the board had received 2 protest ballots totaling 100% of the total service charges to be levied, of which 100% was in favor. And with that, I recommend you adopt that resolution.
Okay, any further comments from the board? Is there a motion? Have a motion? That was thank you for your second, Mr. Kennedy. All right, please vote.
Unanimous vote. Okay. Item 46, public hearing on the annexation of the Barrett Ranch East Development to Zone 4 of the Sacramento County Landscape Maintenance District and the levy of assessments. Adopt resolution approving advance funding agreement, direct the clerk to tabulate the assessment ballots, and adopt resolution annexing the territory to the district and confirming the levy of assessments.
So this item is very similar to the last, but it's a different district. It's again related to the Barrett Ranch East Development, and it's their project conditions required them to annex into Zone 4 of the County Landscape Maintenance District. So with that, I recommend that you open the hearing and consider any testimony, close the hearing, and then recognize the project as exempt pursuant to CEQA, and with that, actually, after you close the hearing, that you tabulate the ballots returned.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Any member of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, close the public hearing. And then we're going to direct the clerk to tabulate the assessment ballots returned.
We have 2 ballots. The first one, the legal owner is Antelope RBVP LP, Barrett Wynn LLC. Site address, Antelope Road, Don Julio Boulevard, Antelope, California 95843, voting yes. And the second ballot, the legal owner is Raynon Bardis, Barrett LP. Site address, Antelope Road, Antelope, California 95843, voting yes.
Thank you. So with those results, so there's actually 2 resolutions to consider. One, I recommend that you adopt the resolution authorizing the agreement for advanced funding, which paid for the effort to bring this to the board. And then 2, I would recommend that you adopt the resolution authorizing the annexation. But I would, like the last item, I need to fill in some blanks. So Section 2 should read, at the close of the hearing, the board had received 0 written protests. And then Section 3 will read, at the close of the tabulation, the board had received 2 protest ballots totaling 100% of the total assessments to be levied, of which 100% was in favor. And with that, I recommend that you adopt those resolutions.
Move staff's recommendation for both.
Please vote.
Unanimous vote. Item 47 is the Child Protective Services Oversight Committee's 2017 annual report.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Supervisors. My name is Angelina Woodbury. I'm the Secretary of the Children's Coalition, which this body appoints to oversee all things related to children in the county. We have several subcommittees on that coalition, one of which is the Child Protective Services Oversight Committee. And here today to present their 2017 annual report is Dr. Maynard Johnston, as well as Chris Orr.
morning.
Good morning, welcome.
So how does this thing work?
And if you would just introduce yourself before you start.
Oh, sorry. This one? Anyway, I'm Dr. Maynard Johnston, the chair of the Child Protective Systems Oversight Committee. And I'm here along with Chris Orr, who's from the District Attorney's Office, to give our annual report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. The Oversight Committee was established in 1996 by the Board of Supervisors. Initially, it was called the Critical Case Investigation Committee. Came about as a result of one significant child abuse death. It provides systems oversight, not just the division of CPS oversight. And then as was stated, we're a member of the Children's Coalition. Today we will discuss our 2017 annual report. The Oversight Committee focuses on agencies within our community that play a role in ensuring the safety of children. It's a multi-agency collaboration which is essential and is a component of child protection to form a stronger safety net for vulnerable children. This year's report continues this focus. In an effort to help increase collaboration between systems serving children and to become more familiar with the services available, the Oversight Committee identified community agencies charged with ensuring child safety or providing resources or services that contribute to improving the health and well-being of children and families in the community. The following agencies, which I'll mention, were invited to present information about what they do and how they collaborate with one another. We had a presentation by DHHS, the Ombudsman. We had a CPS Medical Fragile Review Team presentation, also a CPS Medically Fragile Unit presentation, and we also had a presentation from the California Children's Service, or CCS.
Slide here, thanks.
Uh-oh.
So I'm going to be talking about the Critical Incident Subcommittee report, which is contained within the overall report of CPS Oversight. The Critical Incident Subcommittee is comprised of community stakeholders and professionals in the field. It includes individuals like Dr. Johnston, a pediatric child abuse specialist, individuals from the District Attorney's Office, nurse practitioners, individuals from the CPS Oversight Program. And our task as a subcommittee is to review cases of near deaths or deaths involving children here in Sacramento. The subcommittee reviewed 8 cases that occurred in Sacramento County during the time period that we were reviewing, in which there was maltreatment or child fatality or near fatality that resulted or was directly related to child abuse. And these aren't just any children, they're children who are somehow connected up with some sort of systems such as CPS. So these are children that were involved in the system and then had a near death or death related to child abuse or neglect. The purpose of these reviews is to identify which systems we can focus on to make improvements on and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors as to what things can be improved to avoid these types of incidents repeating in the future. We made numerous observations as part of the subcommittee. The first is there was a lack of critical thinking when making judgments about how to treat cases. In this instance, what we learned was that something that's been kind of going on for a number of years, which is a little bit of a lack of a holistic approach to analyzing a case. The CPS workers on some occasions and supervisors did not appear to use information in previous referrals, and instead relied upon information given by the parents without first verifying that information, which resulted in children being put back in homes where some of these critical incidents occurred. So children dying or nearly dying.
Okay, I have two supervisors who'd like to comment. I'd like to ask you also to move over to the podium, or the two microphones so we can hear you a little better. Thank you. Supervisor Natoli?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, this bullet, and again, I appreciate the bit of background you gave, but certainly raises serious concerns in my mind that, and you know, again, it's boiled down here to one sentence. There was a lack of critical thinking when making judgments about how to treat cases. You expounded upon that and said that, if I heard you correctly, that because of that, at least in the judgment, obviously, of the Oversight Subcommittee review of this, that then children were placed back into situations or remained in situations where they were at great risk. Is that accurate? Maybe expound about it, because I mean, you gave a little bit of background, but I guess to me, this is one of the reasons why we have the Children's Oversight Committee. That's why CPS exists, is to utilize the tools that are available to them, recognizing that it's an imperfect system, but nonetheless. So I guess I need to hear a little bit more if I could.
I'm glad you want to.
Okay.
I'm glad you want to hear about that, because it's hard to boil it down in one sentence.
Yeah.
So.
Just, Mr. Cerner, was that your same question, or?
Yeah, more or less. I wanted to understand kind of how the Oversight Committee is actually kind of qualified to make that kind of judgment call of a someone taking an intake call, for instance, when that is that's their profession. And so this is a bold statement, and it raises the kind of questions that Supervisor Natoli asked. So yeah, I share some of the same
So I think the origination of the Oversight Committee was because this had happened in the past. And to say that it only happened 19 years ago and happened in 2017 would be inaccurate too. It's been happening over the years. We get these critical incidents over the years, and the reason why the state requires CPS to report on these critical incidents. So it's not just the judgment of the CPS Oversight Critical Incident Subcommittee. CPS is actually involved deeply in helping us understand what happened. Now, as CPS is stuck with the balance of reuniting children with their families and protecting children, and that's a difficult balance that they have to try to make. And the CPS Oversight Committee, I think we'd like to lean more towards keeping children safe. CPS Oversight, CPS themselves as an agency has to balance that goal that they have of trying to reunite families. We saw cases where, now they have thousands and thousands of cases. We saw 8 where there were circumstances where errors were made or judgments were, things missed that put a child into homes where the child ultimately either died or nearly died. And the things that we see in some of these oversight reviews is that a parent may represent something to CPS. There may be repeated calls from mandated reporters to CPS. Let's say a call in 2011 saying the parents are being negligent towards their children or being abusive towards their children. And for whatever reason in 2011, they don't have enough information to sustain that, and they clear that call. Maybe they get another one in 2013, they clear it. And maybe down in 2014, they get another call from a mandated reporter, and they don't go back and relook at those other 2 calls as effectively as we think they should. And so going back and not just accepting that just because it was unfounded in 2011, unfounded in 2013, doesn't mean we should consider the whole picture in 2015. This is something the CPS Critical Incident Group and CPS Oversight has recommended in the past that they try to improve. We made those recommendations in our prior reports, and we have seen efforts where they've improved. They've actually taken these case scenarios, which are real-life case scenarios, taking them back to their workers, and thanks to money that you all, I think, provided, they're able to revive their training department and get the ability to take these scenarios back to their supervisors of their teams and say, this is a scenario we had. These are the judgments we made. We didn't look at these sort of things. Should we look at those now in the future? How would we do this case differently? And so they don't have to pay for a package with some provider to help them understand how to improve. They actually have the real life scenarios they can go back and take back. This is still an area that we still see errors in. So,
Mr. Cerna?
Thanks. So you mentioned training. So what I want to understand very clearly here is whether or not the Oversight Committee is making a conclusion about the lack of critical thinking that was applied to an incident or incidents was a function of someone not following the protocols that they were trained to follow, or is it too much caseload? I mean, it could be a whole number of factors. So just to say that it's a lack of critical thinking really leaves us kind of in a quandary in terms of understanding what was missed based on your assessment, your opinion of what was missed. And it's not unlike so many other things that we do as a local government to understand, how professionals are trained and then take that training and apply it in a real world circumstance. I need to differentiate the two, so maybe you can help me.
I think there's two things. One, training we think is absolutely critical. We'd like to see the training of these individual past cases rolled back out, not just the supervisors, but all the way down to the line level worker, which is going to be difficult because it's going to mean taking people off the line in order to go receive training. And that's going to be one thing that we think is critical. Dr. Johnson in a few minutes will be speaking about caseloads, but their caseloads are higher than the rest of the state recommendation, higher than comparable counties in Contra Costa. Other counties have lower caseload counts per social worker, which we believe does put an extra toll on them. If they're trying to clear cases, it doesn't give them as much time to critically go through each of those past instances. If a worker in the past has said this is unfounded, and they've got, now the worker has 17 cases they have to get through, it's going to be hard to go back and try to go, well, do I need to look at this holistic picture? Do I need to go back and reevaluate this whole person's past? When a worker in the past said this is unfounded, and I've got a new incident, can I assume that unfounded really was unfounded? And part of the thing as it relates to unfounded and cases where they've cleared in the past is in past reports, we've talked about the fact that some things they were calling unfounded truly were not unfounded. And when CPS has gone back and reevaluated and said, my goodness, we had a misunderstanding, some workers, not CPS as a whole, but some workers had a misunderstanding of what should be unfounded in a prior case. And so when a worker relies upon something that wasn't accurate in the past, it does put a child in jeopardy in the future. So we think it's going to take training that we'd like to have rolled out to not just the supervisors, but down to the line level workers. And we would, as a committee, we are recommending, Dr. Johnson will talk about it, figuring out ways to lowering those caseloads so they can provide more attention to their individual clients.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, if I could, I just want to, again, certainly appreciate your response to Supervisor Cerna. Just probe just a little more deeply. Than the 8 cases you looked at were out of the thousands and thousands of cases. And if I heard you correctly, though, Chris, it was that you said that in your review, the committee's review of those cases, that kids were either put back into the situation or allowed to remain in a situation, and that some died because of that?
Correct. That is correct.
Could you stand between the microphones,
Yes,
please?
sorry.
Thank you.
And I guess then I would just take
those are contributing factors.
Contributing factors, right?
I mean, whether the parents are criminally liable, those are issues.
Right, right. That's all going to sort it out. But I guess I point to that because, again, going back to 1996 and being a member of the board at that time, and what, basically, I think, drove this board and this community to have a very distinct and I think a very serious conversation about child welfare, about child deaths, about situations about family reunification, and about certainly keeping families together. And we've gone back and forth, as your report points out, and you've said in your comments over the years, making those adjustments and certainly I think improving training. But it was a very serious situation at that time, and there were some subsequent ones that occurred that really required and I think demanded of us as a board and a community to look at how we were basically handling these types of situations. But so what I hear, and I don't see it being any less concerning in the sense that if, in fact, to your point, there were contributing factors and children died, And we're not going to prevent every death. I get that. That's our goal. But I guess for purposes of today's presentation, and I guess I turn to Bruce, I know we've got a response from the department and so forth. We're not looking at all those cases specifically, but I'm going to say that from this board member's perspective, that prompts me to harken back some 22 years into the situation that may not make the headlines because it was a different set of circumstances. But then it says to me that, on this path to trying to be the best we can be in protecting children and keeping families safe and children safe and keeping them together, that if we have children that are still dying, we need to then evolve our system and our ability. And if it means reducing caseloads, if it means doing more to support our children, Child Protective Services Department and folks. But to me, Bruce, and again, you've been here off and on over the years, and certainly have been a part of that. I just think it's key because, again, that to me is the point. Is all the children we save and keep safe is one thing, but if because of what's being pointed out here, and we probed it a little more deeply this morning, then that says to me that we've got more work to do to keep children safe.
Madam Chair, if I might, Michelle is going to respond to all the committee recommendations, but to the supervisor's point, I was at the state level when the tragedy occurred 22 years ago that led to all of this. And I can assure you from my assessment, a lot has happened since then. And Michelle's going to speak specifically to this issue of critical thinking because there's extensive amount of training that is done for all staff in this area. And we keep evolving in terms of the type of training that we do to ensure that it's as good as possible. But these 8 cases that were reviewed, as you point out, out of thousands, are still an important indicator of things that we have to look at system-wide. And I think I'll just let Michelle speak to that when she gets up there, and then if you have further questions, we can add information.
I think you have some more to go on.
Thank you. Yes. So one of the other, this one's a little bit, second point is that medically fragile children are not always assigned to be served by a medically fragile unit. This was one case, and we felt that child should have been assigned to the medically fragile unit and have a public health nurse assigned. You have in the past funded additional public health nurses, and I think the department can address whether they're fully staffed in that area. But those are factors that affect the safety of children. The next one is a big point that we're going to see a lot more, I believe, in the upcoming years, which is the impacts of parental drug usage, including the use of legal marijuana on child safety and well-being, are not always adequately addressed. Some of our cases, many of our cases, have overlaps with drug usage, both illegal and legal drug usage. And it's easy for a CPS worker to come in and assess, okay, there's methamphetamine in the house, this is a danger to the child. It becomes much more complicated when we're talking about medically prescribed marijuana and now legal marijuana. What is the effect that's going to have on children in the home? Just because they're allowed legally to have it, allowed to have 6 plants in the back of the room, does that present a danger to a child? And we believe that is something that CPS is going to have to address in the future. It's a difficulty for law enforcement.
Why would that be different than if they were drunk?
It causes...
That's still a danger.
It does cause issue, I believe, with some of the CPS cases we've seen where a worker's like, but they have a prescription, or wait a minute, they're legally allowed to have marijuana in the house. Can they smoke it around their children? We make laws about where they can smoke it in a car, but there's not a lot of laws or guidance legally as to what they can do as it relates to around their children. And so I agree with you. It shouldn't be much different than if they're drunk around their children, putting their children in danger. But getting CPS to have some guidelines and to be able to make those manageable guidelines that they can roll out to their workers, I think is a task they're going to have in the future in light of the repeated cases that we saw. So I think statistic-wise, among the number of Sacramento children that died who had a family history of drug use, 39 of 126, or 31%, the most commonly used one was marijuana, which was 51% of the families involved in the illegal drug use. So the cases we're reviewing, there is drug use rampant, and the number one drug is marijuana. Our next point is that there was a lack of follow-through or follow-up when closing a referral, and a failure to ensure parents are taking advantage of suggested resources. Sometimes CPS will receive a call out They decide that they're not going to open a case, but they're going to do an informal referral off to some of our providers for mental health services or drug and alcohol services or domestic violence services, which would help and support the welfare of the child. But they make those referrals, and because they're non-obligatory for the parents to follow through, there isn't really a warm handoff where we actually make sure that the parents are going to these services that were suggested. And we're paying providers, Birth and Beyond, number of providers and those sort of things, to receive these people. And it seems to me we could make a simple connect up. We referred you to Birth and Beyond, and then Birth and Beyond calls back and says, you referred someone and it wasn't obligatory, but just so you know, they never came. So that we can have some tracking of if we make voluntary recommendations to families and they don't follow through, that maybe someone should go back and check up on those children again. Some investigations appeared incomplete or closed prematurely, and this is where we saw cases where parents gave statements to CPS workers, and then the social worker didn't necessarily follow up to verify those statements or follow up the collaterals. And then there was a lack of communication between community care providers, which led to missed opportunities to provide the best quality of service to families. Again, this is following up with medical staff, social workers, and community providers. And each of these areas, we don't believe is intentionally that they're trying to do this. It's just that they have these high caseloads and they have to get through their caseloads. They get a number of cases each month and they have to get through their cases, which is going to result in them not being able to follow up with necessarily some of the other collateral contacts that could help them make good assessments. We do want to indicate that we have seen a big change over the years. Just in the short time I've been on the committee, 4 years, we've seen a progress in CPS, and we're very appreciative of their openness in trying to tell us what they're doing and improving. Dr. Johnson's been on for 19 years, and I think he'll comment further about some of those changes.
Well, actually, I came on the Oversight Committee in about early 1997, so I've been involved since early on, and then besides Adrian Conway, we had Rebecca Meza, which happened a few months after that. So, and we're condensing into one short sentence lots of discussion, lots of information, and it's hard to get that message across without spending a lot of time. And I would say that CPS's Child Protective Services is on board with all these types of recommendations. They've never ever, in my experience, said, no, we don't agree with that. So anyway, our 2016 recommendations that we presented last year, we had 3 recommendations regarding the use of public health nurses by CPS. And as you'll notice in the report, we've seen progress in this area with the increased collaboration of PHNs in assessing medical fragile units. There's still work to be done, however. Fully staff the child abuse bureaus of law enforcement, because we are systems oversight, we're not Child Protective Services oversight. And so that's a thing that we're working on for this coming year to assess I got off track here.
I'll be able to cover that in my section.
Anyway, law enforcement, the committee will report its findings at next year's report to provide additional mandated reporter training for DHA staff, which is, and there have been 900 staff members trained since our last report, which is very significant. And then, also the Blue Ribbon panel recommendation, which we also had in 2015 and 2016, it may be met by a collaboration with this CDRT, the Child Death Review Team, and the formation of its Child Abuse and Neglect, or CAN subcommittee to identify trends, risk factors, patterns across cases, and categorize opportunities to identify and intervene in cycles of violence. The committee will be diverse, multidisciplinary, and hopefully this will meet our goal of a blue ribbon-like panel, and hope to have that in place by the end of the year. 2 recommendations had to do with policies and procedures, and they have done an excellent job in that area. They've, out of 9,000 PMPs reviewed, 156 were deemed to be relevant, and a lot of those have been put on the website so they can be accessed out in the field through their mobile devices. And they plan to have all the policies and procedures updated by the year 2020. And the call center, domestic violence first. CPS reports it's in the process of completing an MOU to have 2 CPS workers outstationed in a domestic violence family resource center to continue efforts to improve outcomes for children. Domestic violence continues to be a concern of critical incidents subcommittee. In the 2015 annual report from the CDRT, 17%, 22 out of 126 of those children, there was a known history of domestic violence in 22 out of 126. In the call center, there's been a marked improvement in the call center, and we're thankful that has happened. Now, the current recommendations are to ensure that social workers receive ongoing training on critical thinking to assist them in their investigation of child abuse, neglect, and or death of children. And CPS, I would say, is on board with this. They've had special training in critical thinking. It's been filtering down through the supervisorial staff and into the line workers. So we're actively involved with them in that. In assessing parents and family situations for neglect or abuse, based on our review, continued emphasis should be placed on the safety and well-being of children, not solely reliant or partially reliant on unverified statements of their caregivers. To ensure that social workers are trained on ascertaining the medical needs of children, including public health nurses in the evaluation process. They're a very important factor, and they should be more utilized. Ensure that social workers are adequately trained to assess the impact of parental drug use, including marijuana, on children in the home, and that marijuana and other legal drug use is considered when formulating safety plans. We ask that the Board of Supervisors request that CPS ensure that stronger drug and alcohol policies are put in place, that CPS workers have the resources needed to evaluate caretaker substance abuse training, ready access to testing, consultative support, etc., and that caretaker substance abuse is elevated to a higher priority when formulating a safety plan. This is a continued recommendation from the previous report. Evaluate and reduce caseloads to be consistent with best practices conforming to the Child Welfare League of America caseload standards, would suggest that caseloads of no more than 12 new cases per month per ER social worker should be the norm. This may necessitate adding more social workers to the workforce. Currently, the average caseload of Sacramento County permanency social workers is 22. The average assignment of new investigations to the emergency response social workers is 17 per month, but it can get as high as 21, which is in addition to cases still open from previous months. for investigations, engagements with the family, and referrals for services. Large caseload and excessive caseloads can make it difficult for the social workers to serve families effectively. And administrative requirements for each case have risen, and the complex cases require more intensive interventions and further add to their workloads. And manageable caseloads can make a real difference in the workers' ability to engage families, deliver quality of services, stay with the agency, and ultimately achieve positive outcomes for children and their families. Another recommendation, number 7, is ensure emergency response social workers verify parent participation with service providers before closing a case. That is medical things like birth and beyond and school issues, et cetera, et cetera. Increase communication between social workers and community providers to ensure that the collaboration results in a better outcome. Increase the number of public health nurses available to social workers working in emergency response division.
For our work plan for 2018, we're going to continue to review the critical incidents that occur within the county, and we're actually going to be focusing this upcoming year on conducting researches on organizations within the child protective systems, and we're going to collaborate with the child death review team in reviewing child abuse and neglect homicides. Last year, I think Dr. Johnson talked about forming a blue ribbon committee. Ended up being that the child death review team was also working on a similar concept. Dr. Johnson just referred to that a moment ago. Rather than doubling efforts, some of us are on those same committees twice, we're going to work together with them and try to come up with some recommendations that can help decrease the number of child abuse and neglect homicides in the county. We're reviewing child abuse report case levels of local law enforcement agencies. In the past, we've focused on just CPS, the agency. In this upcoming year, we're now looking at all of the law enforcement agencies throughout the county to evaluate case levels of the law enforcement agencies to see whether they're able to respond adequately to child abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse types cases, and whether they have adequate staffing levels. And we hope to have some hard data for you next year as to where we're at on that as a county.
So following the Oversight Committee's 2016 annual report, resources were allocated by the Board of Supervisors to address identified needs. Funding for improvements to CPS hotline enabled more social workers to staff the hotline, led to the expansion of supervisor duties in order to cover weekends, and it led to refinements to the hotline menus and caller experiences. And the Oversight Committee has observed progress in this area and wishes to thank the board for their support. The Oversight Committee currently has 11 members. Chris and I are the only ones here today. I just looked around, but we do have 2 members of the coalition that are here. If they would stand, I'd be like to thank. And you've met her already, so that's great. And we're always looking for new members to carry on this important work, and so hopefully we'll get some new members of our committee. So we really appreciate your time and interest and collaboration. So
We do have a couple more questions here. Mr. Natoli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back to, and I know we discussed this in last year's report, at least to some degree, and it relates to, again, the public health nurses and the follow-up with the high-risk medically high-risk children. And and I know that, Michelle will probably cover some of this in her report, but I think this falls to something that this board needs to have a conversation about. And Nav, I'd look to you and Bruce on this, because what the report says is that, and again, it may be embedded in the law, that once cases have been closed, CPS, public health nurses, have no authority to continue seeing high-risk, medically at-risk children. I think with what we've attempted to do in recent years, certainly trying to build back our child welfare system, and recognizing that obviously the social workers are on the front lines, but so are public health nurses. And I see the public health nurses being gatekeepers in a lot of respects, in the sense that certainly doing their analysis at the time there may be an open case. If we've identified medically fragile children that are at high risk, it would seem to me that there's an obligation, morally, if nothing else, that we ought to, knowing, and I guess I would like to link this back to examination of cases where high-risk medical children may have then ended up in a far worse situation because the case was closed and then something else bad happened. So my point being here, and I know we had a discussion even during the recommended budget discussions a couple of months ago about the role of public health nurses. And I for one, believe that they are critical in the equation, and certainly not to take away anything from social workers or others, but I think that we need to find a way, because what this says here, at least in the report from the coalition and from the committee, is that if we want to do that, follow-up would need to be provided through another source of funding. Okay, so then I want to have that conversation. If funding is the issue, and it's not so much the authority under the closed case, that what will it take to, and again, I don't know how many cases we're talking about here, and so I think there's some other information I'd like to have as a follow-on, is to have that discussion about how, in this county anyway, we make it enough of a priority that we either sufficiently fund and or find the resources to make sure that public health nurses, assuming that there is some willingness by families, again, not to insert ourselves where we can't do that. But I know with our family resource centers and our Birth and Beyond, and with the other resources we do through public health nurses and certainly our complement of partners in the healthcare delivery system in this community, there must be a way that we can find to fund sufficiently the follow-on that's needed for at least that segment of the population, recognizing there are needs throughout the entire population. And I guess I would, as a part of kind of the question in the statement, I guess, Dr. Johnson or Chris, any comments you might have? Obviously, Michelle get a chance to respond, and maybe Bruce and Nav as well. But I, for one, want to have that conversation. It was last year's recommendation. It's been touched on as it relates to public health nurses. And I just see that as such a compliment to what we do. So any other thoughts you might have?
Well, years ago when CHDP was very, very active, they had at least 22 public health nurses in their program. And then because of the issues of the economy, that went down to 0. And so that was a place where we as pediatricians could call up a CHDP and say, we have a concern about a child, and then they would be, because most of them are CHDP involved, they would, or a lot of them were, they would go out and follow up with those cases. Now, a lot of hospital systems have public health nurses, and that's another resource that could be used by CPS. In other words, a warm handoff. We're closing this case. You're the provider of care. We can't legally continue our presence, but we have concerns, would you follow up with them and then get back to us if there's an issue? So not all hospital systems are so endowed to have public health nurses, but some of them do. And so that's and no child should be, depending on your health system, shouldn't, if you're in this health system, you get that benefit. If you're in another health system, you don't get that benefit. It would seem that all children, if they need a public health nurse, and they feel the pulse and they know the medical stuff. I mean, the social workers are not trained in medicine, and that's why they need somebody to kind of give them guidance, and then we want the social workers to ask questions. Not just the social workers, but of their primary care provider or their specialists if they're involved in specialty care, and do all that and set all those things up before they're discharged.
I guess I would just say my takeaway from this is that we had a recommendation last year. It still stands this year. It's embodied in what you said or embedded in what you said and pointed out. And that I see a gap there, at least as has been pointed out here this morning. And maybe there's ways to fill that gap in different ways. But it seems to me that that ought to be a real priority for at least that segment of the population that we know have been identified as being high risk. And I guess I would ask maybe of the coalition and the committee, and certainly of county staff, to maybe take that particular segment and again, if bad things are happening or the risk grows because we've closed the case and they're left to be at the hands of their parents or the caregivers, and then we see that return that you referenced in other ways. I guess I'd like to see some analysis, but rather than spending a lot of time analysis, I guess I just got to believe from what you say and certainly what we've heard over the years that having that additional connectivity, certainly from the standpoint of the youngster or toddler or maybe infant in some cases, that's just a key piece. And so I guess what I would like to see, and certainly appreciate the committee bringing forward, certainly hear from Michelle, but also from Bruce and Nav, some analysis. Again, maybe as soon as even we got final budget coming up, we need to fill this gap to at least have a conversation about where this fits in the priorities. Because what I'd like to see is by this time next year, hopefully to see at least progress being made to address that particular issue. Because I get the sense that people have kind of said, well, this is as far as we can go. We don't have the resources. Discussion about warm handoff may be part of Michelle's presentation or not. But I think that needs to be key, and I guess I'd be looking forward to that in next year's report. But sooner than that, maybe as soon as a few weeks out, to have a conversation about how we might be able to help fill that gap, either through a coordination, through some commitment of resources, or some other discussion about how we do that to make sure that that nursing component, public health nurses are key, is a piece of this going forward. And if we close the case, that maybe as relates to the actual issue, but it doesn't leave that child kind of stranded potentially. So
one thing I'd like to say is that we were just talking about 8 cases over the last 2 years, but I still attend the Child Abuse and Neglect, Screening for Child Abuse and Neglect Committee. It's 3 of the 4 hospital systems participate in that. And so we meet twice a month, and I would say that we look at 50 to 60 cases. It spans maternal issues, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all those type of cases. And these issues that we're talking about today are prevalent in those cases too. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. And we've had cases that were closed and we've had them reopened because we felt, and then CPS, who's at the table, agreed that we should have reopened these cases. So these aren't deaths, but there's, so this is not a problem that just relates to 8 children that we happen to come across. It's pervasive in a lot of areas, but I can tell you things, it seems to have improved. CPS, from my perspective over all these years, has been very, and that goes all the way back to 1978, has been very receptive to our ideas, and they want to do a much better job, and I think they're headed in that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Cerna?
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the work that you've presented here today. I do have a number of questions, though. I guess I'll start with the work plan. You mentioned that one of the intents here is to collaborate with the Child Death Review Team when it comes to child abuse, neglect, homicides, which leads me to believe that that's just something that has not happened in the past. And I guess the obvious question is, why hasn't it happened in the past?
Well, that's what we wanted to do. I mean, we wanted to put a group together to look at all the issues, and I could list a number of them. Communication between doctors and mandated reporters, between hospitals and mandated reporters, and between hospitals and the CPS system and then the hospitals together. And I mean, it's just, there's so much that needs to happen, and the things could work in law enforcement and probation and education system. All these systems, if working together more closely, could lead to a better outcome. And we've recognized this for years, and we've been actively trying to kind of address this issue. And then the CDRT, looking back over a long period of time, there's 60-some deaths related to child abuse, and their goal was to put together a group much as what we envisioned, and so we were invited, and we enthusiastically wanted to be involved. And so putting together and bringing in all the players, physician groups, hospitals, district attorneys, the police, the probation, all these systems. I mean, and we hope to have it together. We hope that it would have been already in place, but to circumstances beyond our control, it hasn't happened yet. But
it seems like it's not rocket science. I mean, I'm not trying to disparage any of the partners you just mentioned, but I think it's fair to say that at least in the last 7 years since I've been here, there's been a great deal of attention placed on can homicides as one of the leading causes of death overall, but certainly as it relates to the Blue Ribbon Commission that you pointed out in the early part of your presentation. Now you have the Black Child Legacy campaign that has grown out of the effort to reduce African American child deaths when it comes to the 4 leading causes, one of which are can homicides. So it seems to me that there's a lot of energy behind wanting to get to the bottom of understanding the causes, but more importantly, how do we reduce the overall number and certainly reduce the disparities when it comes to child abuse and neglect. So that leads me to my second question, related question, is what are, if any, the kind of structural intersections between what the Oversight Subcommittee is doing and all of the architecture of the county's effort, the First Five effort, working with Sierra Health Foundation, now branded the Black Child Legacy Campaign. How does that work with your charge to do what you do each year?
Well, that's our goal, as I said, is to try to bring all the players, as many of them as we possibly can, together, and then to work as a team to try to solve some of our issues, to make things flow better. So we recognize the issues, we deal with the issues better. It's a necessary thing that needs to happen, and I think everybody wants it to happen. It's just and so we're hoping the catalyst is this program or this thing that this CAN or Child Abuse and Neglect program that or study that the CDRT is going to put together. I would agree with you that exactly we need to do it.
Yeah, with all due respect, no one can hang their hat on wants and hopes. We got to. I mean, this is a real critical issue, to say the least, for this county, and we've actually set for ourselves the objective of reducing can homicides overall, and certainly in the African American childhood population, significantly within just the next 2 years.
If I could address it briefly too, I think part of what the issue is that the child death review team is set up to review child deaths in general. They provide the statistics, they provide information and recommendations. CPS oversight is charged with investigating the systems that relate to that. And what Dr. Johnston's original Blue Ribbon kind of vision was that to start talking amongst the two, not just child death review team and CPS oversight, but to all the collaterals where we as a community decide we're going to put children at the forefront of our thought process, working together, which is going to take more than the group of the child death review team and more than CPS oversight. It's going to kind of take an overall community commitment to say that hospitals, even though it may not be to your bottom line, you're going to come and be involved with a committee that meets multiple times a month to discuss child deaths and what we can do to improve that. We have some law enforcement on our groups, but it's going to take more of those sort of individuals. It's going to take psychological, psychiatric mental health professionals being involved so that when a parent gets sent in for a 5150 hold, somebody says, wait a minute, where are the children at? Are the children at home? Is there someone that's going to be taking care of the child now that you're in on a mental health evaluation? And I think what Dr. Johnson's original vision with the Blue Ribbon Committee and what we're hopeful to do with uniting with Child Death Review Team is to try to be able to present something where we're going to have some sort of community gathering where we actually get those, not just the public sector, but the private sector, the providers together, where we try to put a focus on a year of time frame. We're telling people it's time to focus on every question, asking what's going on with the children as it relates to this individual, whether it's when a person gets arrested and the police officers go, wait a minute, I'm arresting you here on methamphetamine charges. Do you have any children at home so we can send CPS out to make sure that there's children are taken care of? Doing a focus that puts all the collaterals together. It's hard, and you ask why it hasn't done before. I don't know why it hasn't been done before. It's by happenstance. I was on the two committees that were talking about the same subject matter, that we were able to unite those two committees. But there's a whole lot more people than just those two committees that need to be united if we're going to try to focus on making children a priority in all of our decisions.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Finally, this is kind of a blanket statement / question. We could have all kinds of oversight of everything that we govern here at the county in terms of all the critical services that we deliver to help improve them, to understand where deficiencies are. And one can accurately state, almost as it relates to any of the above, in terms of service delivery here, that we'd all like to do better if we had the resources to do it, right? So what I'm trying to decipher from some of the critique that's clearly in this report is how much of that is attributed to the fact that the five of us are forced to make very, very difficult decisions all the time, especially every June and September when we're talking about recommended and final budget. And the fact that we're torn, we're always torn because we have to make judgment calls about how to prioritize service delivery based on a limited resource base. So how much of what you just presented is really steeped in us just not being able to work with enough, generally speaking, to reduce the caseloads or to have the number of social workers that you think we need to address some of the issues you're talking about, because that's important to know. It's not just an asterisk at the bottom of this thing. It's really fundamental to it.
The monetary issues have to do with a number of social workers, say, and then also public health nurses. That would be the biggest expense by far. As far as a blue ribbon situation, that I don't see that costing the county anything. Some of the organizations that participate, those people would be away from their other duties, so they might cost them a bit, but I think they would benefit in the long run by participating in such a commission. So did you have anything to say?
So I think that your ultimate question is it just because the hard decisions get made that some of these decisions are going to be made in a way that may not be as beneficial. And those are hard decisions. As a CPS oversight, our job is to look and say, what things do we think can be improved? And the hard decision is for CPS to say how they can go about improving it with or without additional funds, because ultimately that's their goal. Yeah. And some of it, I think, is deeply driven by funding and the decisions on what to do with funding, which is obviously well beyond our control. I think about little small counties out in the middle of nowhere where they don't have a lot of people, and maybe they only have 2 or 3 social workers, but they don't have 17 to 21 cases coming in. And so we are the product of a county with millions of people and having to figure out how to allocate those resources.
I think it's really two statements to think about. Is how do you improve the service delivery? How do you keep kids from dying? How do you keep kids from being injured or threatened? Given the resources you have, that's one statement. The other is, what could you do if, fill in the blank, in terms of giving us something to chew on every June and September about that question of priorities. And so maybe in the future, you might think about the format of your presentation, given kind of the constructs of those two limitations.
I think we appreciate that. It always is hard to figure out how to synopsize a year's worth of meetings and evaluations of cases into something that is beneficial to you all. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the committee's work, and we always appreciate hearing your comments.
Thank you for allowing us to present and be
Sure.
so attentive. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 48, Department of Child, Family, and Adult Services Response to the Child Protective Systems Oversight Committee 2017 Annual Report.
Okay. Good morning,
Good morning.
Michelle.
So Michelle Callejas, Director of Child, Family, and Adult Services. And so I want to first start off by acknowledging the Oversight Committee and thanking them for their ongoing work. As you heard, they've been in existence for many, many years. And I firmly believe that the only way we can make improvements in our system is to be transparent, to show our data, to show where we're doing well and also where we have challenges. And they have been instrumental in making recommendations that have helped us make improvements over the years. So we are thankful for that and have enjoyed our partnership in working together to improve safety and well-being of children in our community. I also want to start with acknowledging our CPS staff, both those that are delivering the services as well as those that are supporting all the services to children and families behind the scenes. They are a dedicated group of employees, and I feel grateful to be part of that team. So in approaching this year's report, you got to hear a lot of the recommendations, a lot of the challenges that were identified by the Critical Incident Subcommittee. And so what I thought I would do is pull up a couple of themes. So looking at training and policies and procedures, as well as collaboration, I think those kind of surmise all of the recommendations. With respect to critical thinking, I really appreciated the conversation. To be in a social worker in Child Protective Services, it's important for them to be able to gather and evaluate throughout the course of casework the information that is available as they make decisions about safety, risk, whether child abuse or maltreatment actually occurred, and then determining the case plan that's most appropriate to the situation. It's equally important that our supervisors and program managers provide the supervisory oversight, the ongoing monitoring and management, coaching our social workers in strong assessment, asking questions to further their investigation. And all of this requires critical thinking. And sometimes it's hard, well, what do you mean by critical thinking? What is that? And it really is about being able to objectively assess a situation and the ability to look at both sides of any given situation. It also involves self-reflection, putting aside any biases that I may have about a particular situation, person, family circumstances, and so forth. And it is something that is not a one-and-done training. It's something that is ongoing, both at the line level as well as the management level. And we are committed to ongoing trainings in this area. And we're trying to figure out how we do it in different ways that will have most meaningful impact in the actual delivery of services. So, as you know, for years we have used the evidence-based tool called structured decision-making. In that, there are all kinds of prompts that allow for more critical thinking and help social workers assess more holistically the situation. It does look at past history, current situation. There's a tool to assess safety. There's a tool to assess risk. We are continuing to implement that, and we train to that on an ongoing basis. We also have been implementing safety organized practice, which is designed to elicit more inquiry. It's kind of training our social workers to be even more curious than they already are, to resolve discrepant information, and also to engage children and families in a way that will elicit more information. And then the Oversight Committee representatives also mentioned the case discussions that we have. And this was a recommendation made by the Oversight Committee several years ago. We have this great quality improvement committee. We review these situations, these near fatalities or fatalities, to try to learn and understand what happened, either systemically from a policy standpoint or from practice. And they were absolutely right. We weren't figuring out how to get it down to the line level. So now we're doing case discussions using these these actual cases and taking them all the way down to the social worker level. Starts with managers, supervisors, and social workers. And we've really gotten good feedback about how effective it is, because they may hear something and then go out on a case and it's a very similar situation, and they know, ask a little further, ask it this way rather than that way, maybe have a child and family team meeting. It's something that is an ongoing effort. With respect to medical needs of children, we are wholly invested in training around identifying medical issues. As Dr. Johnston pointed out, we aren't trained medical professionals, so we rely heavily on our public health partners in the Department of Health Services. We work closely with Dr. Cassirier and her team for many, many years. In 16-17, we also partnered with California Children's Services under Public Health, and they delivered division-wide training to all our social workers and supervisors to better identify medical conditions. We also, in fiscal year 17-18, implemented a comprehensive cohort training curriculum focused on not just the medical needs of kids, but dental needs. We know a lot of our kids come in and have significant dental issues. And also explaining to our new social workers and ongoing the role of our public health nurse partners so that they know how to utilize them. They're available for consult. Sometimes they'll go out into the field to help with assessments. So we really see them as a critical partner. And then we've been participating in a hospital roundtable to really get beyond just our immediate resources within public health. We've been working with the local hospital systems. So we have a roundtable that meets every other month at Shriners Hospital. It includes Shriner, Kaiser, UC Davis, Sutter Medical Group, Black Infant Health, our public health nurses, emergency response social workers, to really address communication issues that may get in the way of our investigations and assessments, and discuss mutual cases, and then doing some co-trainings across systems. And then the issue of parental substance abuse and training. We fully recognize that substance abuse is one of the top 3 risk factors for our families: substance abuse, domestic violence, and parents who are struggling with mental health issues are our top 3. Substance abuse, we guess that it's roughly 80%, if not more, of the referrals that we get, the cases we have, involve substance use or abuse. We are firmly committed to providing ongoing training to that. We have several different trainings about the effects of substance abuse, how to assess whether, for signs of use, recognizing drugs and drug manufacturing in the home. We've trained on from a structured decision-making perspective. There are several substance use abuse questions that are in both the safety and the risk assessments, so we utilize that tool. And then we have a two-part series that was a joint effort, a curriculum development by our partners at UC Davis as well as County Council, to really look at a comprehensive assessment that's legally compliant but also gets to strong assessments and, more importantly, strong case plans to be able to address the issues. And then you heard earlier with the training piece, you heard from a participant in our early intervention family drug court where we were able to keep her and her child together while she worked on her addiction. So we do make our social workers aware of that great program, the early intervention family drug court, and then when we have to take kids into care, we do have the dependency drug court. We are very fortunate to have that in our community. Not all counties do. So policies and procedures, I rolled up just a couple of the themes, and some of it rolls over to the critical thinking piece. So when we talk about verification of information, verification of service participation, I just want to make clear that in any assessment, when there are allegations of child abuse or neglect, the focus is first and foremost on child safety and well-being. It is not our practice to rely solely on unverified statements. So I just want to be clear on that piece right up front. So as referenced in the critical thinking discussions, we train our social workers to ask questions when there's discrepant information, to follow up on it. We're implementing child and family team meetings, which is bringing together the kids, the family, the kids when it's age appropriate. They can identify support systems. That's another way for us to verify information, to get everybody on the same page. Sometimes we've had family members say, well, that's not quite accurate. Here's how I see it. And then our social workers try to resolve that information. As Mr. Orr stated, we are tasked statutorily with keeping kids and families at home when it's safe to do so and determining when it's time to remove. And part of that is verifying information. With respect to verification of service participation, it is the expectation of our social workers that when they close a case and they have made referrals to services to speak directly to safety or risk issues, that they should in fact verify whether those services occurred. Oftentimes, parents will say, yes, I'll go participate. And maybe they show up and we close the case, but they don't continue. And I think where we can do a better job is through the child and family team meetings, making that warm connection early on before we close the case, and ensuring that they're participating. Now, there's nothing that stops the parents from participating after we close the case. Because we don't have any authority to make them do it if it doesn't rise to a higher level of intervention. But we've got some social workers that are really great with engagement, connecting our families to ongoing natural community support so that they don't come back to our attention.
Pause for a moment.
Sure.
Thank you. So on the point that you just made, Michelle, about verification of follow-up with various services, I assume that there's two general categories. There's court-ordered and then there's non-court ordered. So, so the voluntary, let's call it the voluntary services that might be recommended by CPS for a family, for a parent, for a child. Do we keep data on any of the cases where we're making recommendations or suggestions about, for instance, going to take advantage of services offered at a birth and beyond site, but because the family might have a linguistic barrier, might have questionable immigration status, in other words, that there might be some built-in barriers that would just keep, a parent or parents from taking advantage of those services so they don't. And meanwhile, it just continues to kind of register with us as, well, it's the parents not wanting to take our recommendation, which they're two different things. So do we track that?
No, and that's a great example of the critical thinking, right? So that when I make a referral, it would be really good if I were to say, now, do you anticipate any challenges with getting there, any barriers to participating? I think for us, we can do a little further exploration. And then it's just trying to figure out how we allow the social workers that time to be able to do that further inquiry. But it's a great point. And it's too easy to just say non-compliant versus, oh, wow, there were some barriers that we missed or didn't address.
Maybe they're relying on, as you mentioned, public transportation, and there isn't a convenient route or frequency of service to permit them to take advantage of the service.
And that's certainly something that in our trainings we can reiterate is when you make the referral, does the family think it'll be helpful? We should be working with them to see if that is something that they think would be helpful, and if so, are there any challenges to actually following through and completing the services?
Well, I know you want to get through your report, but I would strongly encourage us to take inventory of how we might begin to track those barriers so we understand them better.
I was just going to add, Supervisor, that that is something we do over in the CalWorks program quite extensively. Perhaps there's some cross-learning we can do there to get us a head start on that.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the substance abuse, I think I spoke to, at least from the training perspective. And again, I want to assure you, substance abuse is a priority for our agency when we're assessing, when we're developing case plans, and certainly when we are developing our policies. So our policies and procedures are as strict as they can be within the legal limits. And again, as we revamped all our policy and procedure work, we work closely with County Council to look at where we can push certain practices and where the line is. So when the situation doesn't rise to a higher level of CPS intervention, meaning we can't, there isn't enough to say they need to come into foster care. But we think there are some issues that the parents got some substance abuse issues, and we need to link them to some services. And we want them to drug test, right? So they can say no, and if it doesn't rise to the level of which we can legally intervene, then it becomes incumbent upon our social workers, and I want to say a lot of our social workers are amazing at this, and really engaging them and trying to convince them and help them get to the drug testing. But there are certain levels that until it hits a certain level, we cannot legally intervene, but we work really closely with families, with support systems to try to get them involved with drug testing, and if it comes out positive, to get them involved in the services that we have in our community. There was a concern also about not having enough drug testing providers. We have some long-standing contracts with Strategies for Change, Bridges, STARS, and the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. So we actively contract with them. We do have testing services available. We have increased at times when necessary. So we monitor that to make sure that we have the testing resources available when our parents need them. And then the issue of emergency response caseloads, and this is a tricky one. I want to just step back first and talk about the number of investigations a month, right? So one of the issues, it is true that we have about 17 on average for 2017. There were 17 new referrals assigned to social workers investigating allegations of abuse and neglect. And I think the recommendation that they were referencing spoke to a Senate Bill 2030 study that was done many, many years ago by the state, as well as the Child Welfare League of America, where they recommend anywhere from 9 to 12 new referrals a month. The challenge here is that we can't control the number of calls that come into the hotline. If they rise to the level that warrants an in-person investigation, we go out on it. So last year we conducted about, on average, 900 investigations a month. So there are a lot that our social workers are engaged in. And then they reference the ongoing, the cases that we weren't able to close within 30 days, so they roll over to the new month. So in addition to the 17, it's roughly another 11 that they carry over, so they're in the range of about 29. Now, in hearing Supervisor Cerna's comment about there are two issues. There's, are there enough, and then are there different ways of conducting business? And part of what we've been looking at is how do we do things differently within, across the whole division. We made significant changes back in 2009, 2010, completely restructured, achieved some efficiencies. That's been a while, and our whole landscape has changed. And so now we're looking at how can we do things differently. For example, we're piloting the use of 3 relative engagement specialists in the upfront, working with emergency response. If I'm out conducting an investigation and it looks like I may have to take this child into protective custody, but there's a relative that's willing, I now have to clear that relative and do all the process there while I'm still trying to conduct the investigation. We've got 3 social workers that we've assigned that are doing the relative assessment piece and doing that whole piece so that the ER social worker can focus on the court documents, can focus on completing the assessment, engaging with the family. We're looking at using clerical more to input data entry into our case management system so that our social workers can be out in the field rather than behind their computer. So just so we are actively looking at how can we do things differently, how can we align the resources we have to achieve the outcomes and the mandates that we're charged with achieving. And I don't know if there are any questions on...
Mr. Natoli?
So, Michelle, just again, recognizing that it's not a static number, so have you got a high vacancy factor? Obviously, turnover can be an issue as well because,
Right.
You can have folks who are there and it doesn't work out, and then you've got folks who are there and know their job and know how to do it. But, I mean, you get that whole, range of folks that may be newer to the scene versus those who have been there for a while. What is your vacancy factor, and how is it? And I know a couple of years ago, as you said before, we had a very high turnover. And some of that was attributed to caseload, some was obviously to the demand by the courts and others to have information timely, and you've spoke to some of that, at least generally here. So I guess I'm curious as where we are with vacancies and with turnover, and because that reflects upon just the difficulty of the job, but also the workload.
Absolutely. So yes, and we were before you several years ago, and I think it was in 2015 our vacancy rate hit almost 18 or 19%. We dipped to a low of 5.5% in November, and we're hovering now around 7%. But we just hired another cohort of 32 social workers. One of the things we're facing right now is ongoing retirements and promotions. So what we did though is this board approved a couple of new units to stabilize court services. And we've also revamped a couple of process areas. But we worked with Department of Personnel Services, and I am so grateful for their willingness to engage with us to revamp our hiring process, because what works for most wasn't working for child welfare, and we were missing new classes of graduates that were then going to other counties. We are now doing open filing. We are hiring in cohorts so that when social workers come on board, they've got a whole team that they're working with. That's how I came aboard, and I still remember the team that I went through. This can be a very isolating and scary part of work, especially when you're fresh, new to the job. So the cohort approach, we've gotten very positive feedback. We've revamped our training. We've figured out what we think is a good balance of giving social workers new cases, but not too many, and the when, and we got a lot of their feedback along the way to make sure that we're hitting it. Some that have been interns are like, no, I can take a few more, and so we do, and we monitor it. So there's a lot more mindfulness to speak, to your point about the caseloads were crazy, and so people were walking out. It was just untenable. So we've made significant improvements there, and we continue to invest in our workforce from that perspective.
Let me just, one other follow-on question, then it goes to, numbers, obviously the reference point for, what either the norm ought to be or, what is actuality it is. And I think to your point about investigating 900 new cases a month, so, you're roughly at 10,000 cases a year.
Yeah.
And that's been fairly steady in recent years, I guess. It certainly can run up or down a bit. But at nearly 29 open cases per worker, again, recognizing the good work, the support system, trying to help alleviate some of that through, input processes and or, other relative investigations that are being done that may alleviate a bit of the overall case workup. I guess what would be an optimum? And again, maybe put you on the spot a bit, but I mean, again, you having come through the system and recognizing what goes into it, and you think about the number of work days, you think about overtime, you think about folks that may have the experience versus those that are working to get there. What is, again, is there the ability? Because otherwise we're going to always get judged by what some report said, what other communities are doing, and I guess what is right for us may not be the exact fit. It may be more or less, recognizing that resources aren't unlimited. But again, in the best of all worlds, recognizing that each case may be different, or there may be similarities, and some are require more investigation than others, and have certain critical natures to them. But these are the ones that meet the emergency response, and so require the follow-up. So that threshold has been met. So I guess my question, Michelle, again, maybe there are some quantifiers to it as well, or qualifiers, but what is case? Otherwise, I can see us be here next year, and we'll be average 17, and we'll be at 28.4 or 29.1, and having a similar conversation, even acknowledging the things that you and others are doing to try to help alleviate the case itself and some of the work that goes into it. So I guess my question to you is, what would be a right number for our county if you had the ability to make that call?
It's a tough question, and each county is structured differently. They say if you've met one county, you've met one county, and especially with child welfare, there are different ways to organize the work. I can only go by the recommendations that have been made, 9 to 12. I know that when we got down to 14, that felt, like the social workers could breathe and do a more effective job. So we are actively looking at how can we reduce the workload if we can't reduce the caseload, right? We can't challenge the number of calls coming in, but can we alleviate the workload of the social worker so they can be more actively engaged with the family to do better assessments, better case plans, better case closure work?
Well, I appreciate your answer, though, but again, what I heard, though, is that with all what you just said, important qualifiers to that at 14, and we're at 29, so we're double that. So if you were at 20 or 21, that might still be high, and somebody, but it would be better. But again, we haven't moved off this number very much, except for there was that period of time.
Yeah.
And so I guess that says to me, as a member of this board, and certainly to the context of one of the questions Mr. Stern asked earlier about prioritization, that if in fact we continue to see with the level of consistency, the number of intake calls and referrals, and certainly the complexity that goes behind that, and if we're really committed to saving lives and keeping children safe, and hopefully keeping families or supporting families to the point where they can get their legs underneath them and get out from their addictions or whatever else is compounding the problem, that we've got to do more to reduce caseload. Workload is a piece of it, but caseload is a very strong indicator, and it's, again, it goes back to what I said, the average. So I think this needs to be a priority, and I guess I would just suggest that as, we talk about budget in the next few weeks, but certainly, mindful of resources, certainly you have to be able to fill positions. You can have authorized positions and fill them, is another piece of that. But so at 7% vacancy, how many positions, what's the number behind that then that?
Oh gosh, we've got, I don't have that in front of me, but something like 350 social workers.
So 25 to 30 positions at any given time that are vacant for one. And then you have.
And then again, we just hired another 32.
So you were down. So you're running at a 7% vacancy factor. You just filled those. So you were closer to 50 or 60 with
Right. So it's rolling. And understand that when we bring on new social workers, they still have to go through all their training. We don't just start giving them a whole bunch of cases. So, and I just want to make clear that the 14 that I said, would be better, that's new referrals, not the 29 that includes the rollover from the prior.
Okay, so at 17, we're still running at a higher number. And I heard Dr. Johnson say earlier there have been 21 in some cases, an average. So. We're still running high.
That's the average.
Not to the extreme, but to the high. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last theme that I pulled out was collaboration. And, I don't think there was any recommendation that the Oversight Committee made that we weren't in agreement with. But collaboration is certainly one of them, and we strongly believe that collaboration is important for this work. There's all kinds of research that shows when child-serving systems work together, collaborate, coordinate care, outcomes are better for children and families. And you have a lot of county departments and system partners and community providers that are invested in working together to improve outcomes for children and families. You have heard, I'll just give you a couple of examples where we have been collaborating, not just with other county partners, but community providers, stakeholders, in working with minors that are sexually trafficked. We work with behavioral health, probation, public health, education, community providers and service providers, stakeholders. For our crossover youth practice model, very similar partnership, along with more partners on the juvenile justice side. Continuum of care reform is an endless quest to kind of collaborate and work with our community partners and system partners to achieve the goals intended by continuum of care reform. And then also, this was mentioned earlier, but the work with the Black Child Legacy campaign, I think that has been extraordinary. And our staff are invested in those collaborations that, at least early on, anecdotally, we are seeing some good things happening. And I know that there'll be an annual report toward the end of the year. So we look forward to discussing that. And then also just the ongoing collaboration with public health, with our medical systems, our local hospital systems, recognizing that many of our kids have medical complications. So we are open to collaborating with whoever wants to join us at the table, so that we can help folks understand what we're going through, but it's also how can we help them on their charge, how can they help us with our charge. I think the implementation of all our different types of teaming meetings, be it child and family team meetings where we bring in partners along with the child and family, our multidisciplinary team meetings where we get in the professionals to really talk about what's the best approach to serving this family. We just have a strong commitment in our community to working together to do this work. So we remain firmly committed to it. And you'll hear a little bit later in our system improvement plan, just the work of our work groups that have joined us to try to improve different areas within child welfare. So I think I'm hoping that I covered everything that you guys were hoping to hear based on the presentation by Dr. Johnson and Mr. Orr. Open to
Any further questions?
Questions.
For Michelle? No? Thank you very much.
Okay. Should I just stay here?
Yeah, are you the speaker for the next item?
Item number 49, 2017-2021 California Child and Family Services Review System Improvement Plan Progress Report and approval of additional strategy.
Okay.
Hi there. So Michelle Callejas, Director, Child, Family, and Adult Services. And we are here again. We submitted a Child Protective Services as well as probation. We submitted a joint report to this board back in February, and you asked us to return in May to provide a little more information. We came back in May, and at that time I told you that we would be back because child welfare is adding another outcome area strategy that we want to improve upon. So that's why we are here today. So just real quickly, the Child and Family Services Reviews, a three-pronged process. It's required by the federal government, overseen by the state. It requires a county self-assessment, a 5-year system improvement plan, and then annual system improvement progress reports. What we're presenting before you today is a new strategy as well as where we are with our latest progress. And so just so you know, the system improvement plan is basically a work plan that identifies strategies and milestones to improve selected outcome areas, and we'll go into this. So as the name implies, the selected outcomes are areas in which the Child Welfare Agency needs to improve. So when we were here in May, CPS presented on the first 3 strategies, and they're the ones in black. So in order to reduce recurrence of maltreatment and reentry, we're implementing child and family team meetings. We believe that will move the dial in the right direction on both of those measures. To increase permanency, just as a reminder, permanency is family reunification, adoption, legal guardianship. So to increase permanency for kids that have been in foster care for longer than 2 years, we have been doing upfront family finding, intensive family finding, and relative supports and services to help get the child toward permanency. And then to improve placement stability, this is ongoing work of identifying and increasing supports for our resource families. Another name change, resource families are known formerly as foster families, so you'll hear that term. I don't know that changing the name has helped us with recruitment, but we are still trying to market both. So today we're here to talk about the 4th area of reducing occurrences of maltreatment in foster care, and we talked again a little bit about this in May. And so our strategy here is to convene a work group to better understand the demographics and address factors contributing to the trends of maltreatment in foster care. So I want to say just, in starting that convening a work group sounds a little passive for something as serious as a child getting harmed in foster care. So I just want to say a little bit more about that. And in order to develop effective strategies and that will actually reduce the number of children being harmed in foster care, we have to really develop a firm understanding, a grounded understanding of what's contributing to that. Too often we see a problem and we just start throwing solutions, usually training or a new policy, without fully understanding what's going on underneath it. So the work group will be digging down into possible causal factors. CPS did a data analysis and identified 3 factors that we think are related, and the work group will continue to dig deeper. They've already been meeting, so when we say convene, it has been convened. And we've got an active group of not just CPS folks, but community partners and stakeholders that are involved in this. And I should add that there are work group meetings for each of these areas, work groups that have been established. And again, it's not just CPS, but it's our system partners, community providers, service providers, and we have several of them here today. And I'm not sure if I have everyone, but I've seen CASA, Child Abuse Protection Center, Lilliput, Sierra Forever Families, and St. John's. Did I get, okay, we got everyone. So these are our community members who are volunteering their time and are just as committed as Child Protective Services is to improving outcomes for the children and families we serve. And I'm very grateful for their willingness to get involved in this. So as I mentioned, Child Protective Services did a deeper data analysis to try to understand why has our maltreatment and foster care rate increased so much over the last couple of years. So there were three factors, and again, we touched on them in May, but sibling sets, referrals of commercially sexually exploited children, and then inaccurate data entry. So with respect to sibling sets, and I'll show you the slide, or maybe I'll just do it now. So if you look at sibling sets, if you go over to the dark section, contributing factors, you can see that the number of siblings in October of 2014 to September 15 were 6 children, 2 sibling sets. It increased to 16 children in 6 sibling sets, and then 21 children in 9 different sibling sets. So one, the positive in that is that CPS strongly values placing siblings together. So we are happy to see that increase. But where we think the contributing factor is with respect to maltreatment in foster care is, say with that 9 sibling sets, I've got, I'm in foster care with my 3 siblings, and the foster parent spanks me and leaves a mark. CPS comes out, and we substantiate as to physical abuse because there are marks on me. The other 3 siblings may not have been harmed, but when we do a disposition on that investigation, we have to assess all the kids. We substantiate as to risk. So they were at risk of being physically abused, neglected. So it's the one that got harmed, and then the 3 that were at risk. It could be that the 3 were harmed but didn't disclose, but we do substantiate as to risk. So as those numbers have gone up, so has the number of substantiation. So we're looking more deeply into that to see if we're practicing in the way that we should. We'll be looking at other counties to make sure to see if there's any differences in practice. For commercial sexual exploitation, so you can see how much this has increased. In October of 2014, 2015, we had 1 child and 1 occurrence. So these are with kids that are sexually exploited in foster care with the new law. If they run from a placement and they are victims of sexual trafficking, child welfare is charged with going out, investigating. If in fact it happened, we substantiate. So although it is a third-party perpetrator, that young person is in foster care, and so that counts as maltreatment in foster care. So you can see that after Senate Bill 855 passed, and then we implemented protocol, the number of children and the number of occurrences has increased. Now, what we need to delve into further is that this is true for all the other counties, and we haven't seen a higher increase. So what we're going to look at is, are we implementing our protocol right? Are we practicing differently than other counties? Because if this were the sole factor, every county would be going up. So that's what the work group will be doing, is digging deeper. And then inaccurate data entry. You can see that in 2014-15, there were 3 data entry errors, went up to 9 in 2015-16, and then in 16-17 up to 20. What we have found that is most common in this is oftentimes when kids come into Child Protective Services, they're in shock, they're traumatized. We connect them with counseling services, and it may be at that point they tell a therapist or a school counselor or the foster parent that something happened to them in which their parent harmed them. And so it was something that occurred while they were still in their home, but they are just now disclosing. When that's called into the hotline, what we realized is the date of occurrence was the date we received the referral, the day we created the referral, rather than there's a different field called occurrence date. If we used that, it would have shown that the actual incident occurred prior to entering foster care. We are doing training around that to make sure that we train all our social workers on that occurrence field. The challenge here is we're also working with UC Berkeley, who provides this data, and the state, because they realize they don't look at the recurrence field or occurrence field. So again, the work group will be delving further into that. Any questions on this? I know it's a lot of numbers. Yeah. All right. So this is a slide that we put in at your request last time. These are the 5 areas that Child Protective Services is actively working on. And there was a request to have the actual number of kids versus just the rate or percentage. So you can see we've entered the numerator number of kids and then the denominator. So that's to let you know where we are with that piece. I think Supervisor Cerner, you requested the N. So that is telling you, this is our whole system improvement plan. As you can see that in 4 out of the 5 areas, we are making improvements. Slow and steady, but we are making improvements. And I will say that, and I appreciate the prior report with the Oversight Committee pointing out that we have made progress. We still have a lot of work to do. Making improvements in child welfare is never, ever over. If I ever come up here and say, wow, we got there, then I need to be asked to leave, because we are in a constant quest to improve the quality and improve the outcomes for children and families. And we continue to learn, and we're invested in that. And I do want to say that although these are the 5 areas in our system improvement plan, we're focused on other areas as well. So the system improvement plan, as you can see, is really focused on what we're not doing well and where we can make improvements. So I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what is working well. So first, we have fewer kids in foster care, and we have seen a slow and steady decline over the years. From May 1st of 2015, we had 2,410 kids in foster care. On May 1st, we had 1,956, so a 19% decrease. And we are committed to continuing to get to decrease that. 1, keeping them out of care, 2, getting them to permanency once they come into care. I mentioned earlier the staff retention. We're making great progress there. With this board's authority, we applied for and received a grant through the state called Bringing Families Home, which for the first time provides housing resources so that when families are involved with child welfare and the sole reason they can't reunify is because of housing, this provides us the resource to do so. We've worked with Department of Human Assistance, Sacramento Housing Redevelopment Agency to leverage other resources. Since July of 2017, we've housed 55 families. Again, these are families that have completed all their court orders or demonstrated behaviors that demonstrate safety, and we've been able to get them home. And then informal supervision. The name is a misnomer. This is the last form of voluntary services in child welfare. These are families that have very high risk. And here this comes to our statutory obligation to do whatever it takes to try to keep kids at home when it's safe to do so. So in 2017, and it's duplicative because kids are open for several months. In any given month, we served 457 children through informal supervision. These are children that, but for this intervention, would have been involved in the court and in foster care. Of those 457, an average of 14 a month, or 3%, ended up needing court involvement because we could no longer maintain them safely in the home. Perhaps they discontinued their substance abuse treatment services, whatever the issue. So flipping it means that in any given month, informal supervision, on average, prevented 443 children from coming into care. This is an area that we are firmly committed to trying to do whatever possible to keep kids out of care. The way to improve our outcomes with reentry, with recurrence of maltreatment, with permanency is to keep them out in the first place. So we will continue working within our emergency response and informal supervision to do whatever possible to keep kids at home and work with our community partners to strengthen families that will allow them to be together. So that is it. Any questions?
No, I don't think I have any questions. I do have a couple speakers, though.
Okay.
First one is Donna Ibbotson. I may have mispronounced your name. I'm sorry. Can't quite read it. On Auburn Boulevard? Okay. Then Beverly Johnson. Then Steve Kempsters and Stephanie Bigler. We do have a 2-minute limit. Thank you.
Donna Ibbotson, Program Director with Lilliput Families, and we are on one of the system improvement work groups. So I sit on the placement stability work group. So it's a collaborative group that works with the county and other agencies looking at factors that contribute to stability for placement. And we've looked at data amongst the county and agencies that are working with the same children. And what we've identified some is the amount of training that families require and that is now being provided to them has shown some significant improvements, as well as most of our resource families right now are actually relatives. So we have a kinship program that also allows for us to provide additional services to those families. So looking at identifying what supports and services are we hearing back from caregivers that have enabled them to maintain the children and to provide the services that they need to maintain the children in the home. So it's been a great experience being on the work group, working collaboratively together with others to look at how do we improve to ensure that we keep kids in homes and that they're not having placement moves. And we've shown a lot of improvement in that area. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Beverly Johnson.
Good afternoon. I'm Beverly Johnson, the Chief Program Officer at Lilliput Families. And we serve over 1,000 families every year in partnership with Sacramento County, so throughout the Sacramento County region. We do that primarily through family finding, kinship support services programming, and through foster care and identifying families who really want to adopt children out of the foster care system. We've been a partner with Sac County for the past 25 years, probably more than 25 years. I wasn't at the agency at the time, but I've served as co-chair for the SIP3, which is looking at permanency for youth that have been in care for at least 24 months or more. And I've served on other SIP programming or SIP processes in other counties, and I have to say that Sacramento County, I can appreciate the time and attention that they have to the process. There's a lot of time and attention, very inclusive and collaborative, and really understand the meaning of true partnership, and very interested in best practices and raising the level of the evidence-based practices that we apply to serve our children and families. And I think also integrity to the data. Very much, they share data. There's more data to share, but I think the process has really involved a certain integrity to maintaining, data quality. So, our primary goal is getting youth back to families, not removing them initially. And I'm happy to provide additional information if needed. I think two things I'd like to emphasize in this particular work group in regards to permanency for children that have been in the system for more than 24 months or more is to increase the support to relatives once we find family. So I think finding family and engaging them is really key. And I thank you.
Thank you. Steve Kempsters.
Thank you all. My name is Steve Kempster. I'm the program director with Sierra Forever Families. And I'm here specifically to speak about the successful collaboration that we have had with Sacramento County and our county partners who are here today. Through Destination Family and funding from the Board of Supervisors and CPS, we were able to support the Destination Family program 2.5 years ago to specifically support permanency for young people who experience one or more barriers to achieving permanency. So these are those young folks who've been moved through several homes throughout their lives in the foster care system, many of whom eventually age out of the foster care system and become homeless or incarcerated or experience drug addiction. Annually, we serve about 100 of these youth with a specialized permanency team. And I'm so proud to say that we have had 90% success rate in maintaining placements and a 70% success rate in finding legal permanency for those young folks. And that is a testament to the collaborative nature of Sacramento County and to your support. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for coming. Stephanie Bigler.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Biegler, Chief Program Officer at the Child Abuse Prevention Center. And I too want to reiterate the cooperation and the partnership that we have had with Sacramento County Child Protective Services. As you all know, it has been an ongoing partnership with Birth and Beyond for 20 plus years. We have appreciated their support and your support. Specifically speaking to 3 outcome areas of the recurrence of maltreatment, the re-entry to foster care, and maltreatment in foster care, it has been my pleasure to serve as co-chair in 2 of those 3 areas. At the onset of adding maltreatment in foster care as a strategy, all 3 of those strategies were all combined in one work group. As we have been meeting, it was clear that the first 2 strategies of recurrence of maltreatment and re-entry to foster care were more closely linked. So the maltreatment in foster care was spun off into its own work group. Which was a real positive because we knew that the process could be reassessed and a more effective and efficient process could result. In regards to recurrence of maltreatment and re-entry to foster care, certainly we support the strategy of CFT meetings and specifically where appropriate, Birth and Beyond Family Resource Center staff will be participating in those meetings. There is another opportunity that we have created within the Birth and Beyond structure. Birth and Beyond and CPS have formed a work group within the structure of Birth and Beyond to take a look at finding specific pathways to accomplish 2 things. Number 1 is to increase the referrals from Child Protective Services to Birth and Beyond when they close a case or when a referral comes in and does not meet the threshold for CPS involvement. The second is to be more efficient and effective with those referrals. Specifically, how do you go ahead and make sure that CPS knows the outcome of a referral? In regards to the committee regarding recurrence of maltreatment in foster care, Michelle did a very good job of describing that the committee really requested additional data, and the additional data then will be the driver behind recommendations so that the recommendations, as Ms. Callejas suggested, align with the data. If appropriate, I would like to go ahead and just add a little bit of information regarding agenda item number 47, which was the Oversight Committee and the, is that appropriate to do?
You're a minute over your time, so can you make it?
I'll go ahead and make it really quick. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What I wanted to just add is that thanks to the leadership of Mr. Orr and Dr. Johnson, the Child Death Review Team's recommendation to do the work group, which will be a subset of CDRT regarding CAN homicide investigations, was coordinated with the Oversight Committee. And what's different about this is that we will be looking at nearly 70 homicides over a period of time and trying to find the trends that then we'll be able to look at systems and be able to make recommendations. And this body has brought to our attention that when we just do an annual report, we don't go ahead and really take a look at trends over time. So I just wanted to say that that will be taking place. In terms of the timing, Dr. Johnson was correct. We anticipate this work group to be started by the end of the calendar year. What we are currently, the Child Death Review Team is working on, is putting together the 2016 annual report, and we're about halfway through that process, and we'll be presenting that to you in the next couple of months.
Thank you very much. Any further comments from board members before we recess? Okay, thank you. We're going to recess to close session.